Welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club JamBOOreeeeeeeeee for the pre-Halloween extravaganza. Yeah, I actually said it. Michael, you're still having problems with your computer?
Good.
All right, excellent, excellent. Well, I do anticipate Raven will be here pretty shortly, and other hosts will no doubt trickle in as the evening progresses. But then again, maybe not. I think Sister Danger is definitely busy because she's got
Halloween.
Halloween stuff, and it's Joe's birthday tomorrow, so Joe may or may not come in. I'm not sure.
Okay. I understand that Sister Danger has witchy things to do around this time of year.
Indeed. I'm almost jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 99.9% of my life, I wouldn't trade my life for anyone's, right? But every once in a while, it would kind of be nice to just look out through someone else's eyes when they're doing their thing, and when she's doing Halloween, I reckon that must be a pretty interesting night for her. So,
well, she's got an advantage. She could just, wear no underwear and have better grip on the grip. You, however, are not going to be good at Quidditch. Hello.
Ring. Hi. I'm having audio trouble.
Okay. We'll try to keep that in mind. How are you, Raven?
I'm okay, I guess.
I'm convinced. Right. Anyway, so welcome to the show, one and all, and thank you everybody for showing up promptly. That's always great for me because sometimes it's a little awkward when I start the show by myself. So I do appreciate your being here in the first couple minutes. Anyway, I don't really know what I want to talk about to start off the show. So if anybody has anything that's pressing on their mind, feel free to offer that up as an opener.
Well, I was baiting you earlier this week.
You what?
I was baiting you earlier this week.
Oh, about the fortune of Elon Musk having grown, was it 34 billion?
36 in a day.
36 billion in a day.
And he's now 100 billion more than Jeff Bezos.
100 billion more? I thought he was only 50 billion more.
I think it's like 100 billion more now.
So what you were saying a few weeks ago about there seems to be kind of like a race to be the world's first trillionaire,
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that it kind of feels like that is like a secret race, and the space race is emblematic of it. But I mean, really, it's a race to be richer than God, richer than the pharaohs. I mean, these guys. If you talk about wealth comparative at the top compared to at the bottom of a society, these guys are richer than the pharaohs were.
I did find out that Elon Musk pays an effective tax rate of 3.3%. Elon Musk does. Jeff Bezos, however, not so much.
Well, I saw Elizabeth Warren say on the TV the other day that Jeff Bezos' earned income is about $85,000 a year.
Yes. Most of his wealth is tied up in stock.
Right. The rest of it's all assets and stuff.
And because he hasn't realized that benefit by selling any, he can keep that wealth, borrow against it,
right?
And, spend the money, and then it becomes a loan, and it's not income,
right?
So yeah, how the rich play.
Indeed. Well, I don't. As I said to you in the Twitter feed, private message, the fact that anybody can make $36 billion in a single day is evidence of a rigged system.
Yeah. I mean, there are windfalls, but that's got to be the biggest windfall I've ever heard of for a one day.
That's the biggest windfall anyone's ever heard of. I mean, heck, if a company made $1 billion profit in a year, that's a really successful company. I mean, super successful, and that's a whole company with employees, not just one person. So for a person to have their wealth increase because of their assets value increases by that amount. I'm not even sure what you can do about that.
I'm thinking that if you want to do something truly spectacular in this world, really leave a mark, maybe it would be a good idea to amass some wealth at this level. But what are they doing? I've seen Bill Gates giving back. I've seen Warren Buffett giving back and making pledges that by the end of their lives, they'll just give it all away. You know?
Sure.
But the rest of them on that top 10 list and the top 100 list, not so much.
I don't even know. I haven't looked at the top 10 list for a long time. And when I did, I think it must have been about 2018. And when I did, to get in the top 10, you had to be upwards of 30 billion. Now to get in the top 10, you must have to have more than 50 billion to get in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Because the really, really rich people like Buffett and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and well, those are the main three that I can think of. I suppose Bill Gates as well. I mean, and those guys that run Google, that's pretty much your top five, isn't it? Right there.
Yeah. And they've all pretty much taken turns with the number one spot.
Right.
So they'll get leapfrogged, and then the next one will take over and have a run at it.
Yeah, I remember Bill Gates has been the richest person in the world on two separate phases of his career, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I'm disturbed by obscene wealth. I mean, I mentioned these guys are richer than the pharaohs, comparatively speaking. But you don't see them building pyramids, do you? You don't see them giving thousands of, well, maybe you do. They give thousands of people jobs, but piss poor jobs, right? I mean, a lot of them anyway. That's certainly the case with Amazon.
Yeah. So number 10 on the list is actually $104 billion, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett slid down to number 10?
Yeah. And the minimum is $100 billion to get on the list.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know what, you know, it's an incomprehensible amount of money. It's like Scrooge McDuck rich. You know, you've got a barn full of money that you can swim in. You know,
Not like that.
Yeah.
And
so I mean, philanthropy is all well and good, right? But you can't depend on it, and the people don't really have a say over how it's distributed. That's the gift of the person doing the donating, right? So, you know,
I've learned since we had these conversations last that there are actual charitable trust annuities that you can create where you still get to own and enjoy the things all the way until your death. And then as long as you have a beneficiary of a charity named in that charitable trust, then afterwards the annuity would go to the charity. But for your whole life, you can be set.
Right.
And you get massive tax breaks for these trusts.
Yeah, because this is going to go to a charity eventually. So yeah, it's one of those laws that was written by rich people for rich people, you know. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with people getting rich. I really don't. I just have a problem with the obscene disparity at the very top compared to what's going on at the very bottom. And I also think that super high taxes on people that are really wealthy are just kind of obvious, and I can't really understand. I think they're talking now about calling a new tax the billionaire's tax, and that's a great word for it, right? Because when you call it a billionaire's tax, you're not even pretending that normal people are going to pay it. There's like less than 700 billionaires in the country. So,
and you're not even pretending that doctors that might have $1 million are going to pay it.
Sure.
You know, people who drive a Mercedes-Benz are not who we're talking about. Those people are poor in comparison.
Oh God, yeah.
They have more in common with the person doing their oil change on their Mercedes-Benz than they do Jeff fucking Bezos.
Right. I was thinking the other day about these people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these super, super rich people. And they must have to have some like serious security, like, you know, that goes with them everywhere, because otherwise they're hostage material big time, right? I mean,
Well, I would figure they wouldn't go to certain countries, you know.
like anywhere in South America for a start.
So
I'm not going to Colombia because I don't want to get mailed back to my family in pieces. You know.
So, Paul, you were sitting around and you were thinking about security situation around one of these rich people, looking for holes in their security.
Yeah, basically that's my thing. Yeah.
The thing is, Paul, when you meet one and you shake his hand, that was your opportunity, right there.
Well, yeah, right.
You can punch him in the face right there. You're that close, or you may never see him again.
Well, yeah. I would never see anybody again if I punched that guy in the face because I'd be behind bars.
Well, sometimes things can be settled behind the scenes. You can get one free punch off if they don't want the bad press of, somebody punched them and they might have a mouth to them.
Right. No, that's not the kind of news I want to make.
Yeah, it's amazing that the rest of us are dealing with the fallout of a pandemic, and the rich keep getting richer, even in a pandemic. In fact, at an increased rate. At an increased rate, they're making even more money.
Yeah, because of the pandemic, though. I mean, especially like Jeff Bezos. I mean, people are shopping from home.
Right.
People who didn't do it before are doing it now. I'm one. I admit. But
I get a lot of stuff on Amazon.
Wow, I didn't see you come in.
Oh, sorry. I should have said earlier. I'm not on camera today. It's nothing. I just don't want to be seen on camera today. So I just thought I'd be on mic instead. So
he's got a big giant pimple on his nose.
Kazum, you got to join us on camera because Noodle said it was a Bones Day.
What?
Noodles, the pug, was able to stand on his own legs this morning. Therefore, everyone's got to give that extra effort. It's a Bones Day.
Yeah, no camera today.
Okay.
So did you dye your beard purple again, Kazum? Is that what it is?
No, I just didn't really do anything with myself today, and I look like shit. So.
Oh right, yeah.
You can always turn the light off. Like I like to do this sometimes.
Now you look mysterious. You look like you're about to show us a scary movie on a late night, Yeah, in fact, because it's like Halloween Eve or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could regale us with a scary story.
Really, the only thing lighting me up right now is the screen.
So I understand, Kazum. I mean, like me, I just did this for the show. Actually, I don't know if anybody noticed, I was actually putting my eyeliner on while we were on the air. Because, I spent the entire day in sweats. And about an hour and a half ago, I had a beard, and no joke, So, I get it.
Yeah, obviously I have bed hair and beard looks all messed up, and then I usually put I color in my eyebrows every day, so you can actually see them. Otherwise, they're transparent and they kind of like Whoopi Goldberg's eyebrows. So, and then I put makeup on my nose because I have all these spider veins on the tip of my nose, and it looks like it looks really bad without that too. So
I had no idea you had that kind of a routine. Damn, Kazum.
If only there were some sort of reason for us all to have a whole bunch of masks laying around that we could just throw on.
Yeah.
I ran to the store earlier in my sweats and the T-shirt and everything that I slept in, the beard, and I put a mask on when I walked in because even though I didn't have any makeup on and my hair was a mess and everything else, I was just concerned that people would see the beard and be like, yeah, look at her.
Right. Hmm.
I mean, you put on the mask, it kind of anonymizes you anyway, so to some degree. So I mean, even if it didn't look that great, they don't know who you are anyway. So
Raven, they weren't looking up here. They were looking somewhere else.
I told you this is for you. this is for you guys. This is for you guys. This is so you don't forget. You don't forget that if you interrupt me, it's because I'm a woman. You're reminded of that. That if you talk, it's because see, you're doing it again.
It's because I'm sexist. So Paul's left, and I'm just going to pronounce myself in charge for a second. Raven, do you have any? Wait, Paul is now dressed like Prince. Is that because Paul listened to?
You mentioned about Halloween. I think I came in this outfit last year. I can't really remember what I was wearing, but I think this was it. So yeah.
The acoustic album from Prince. You listened to it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So about a couple months ago, I got a hi-fi finally. Right. Because it's been years and years since I've had actually a decent stereo system. You know, when I was raising my kids, I really couldn't afford it. So I really haven't had like a proper, decent, good sound system for a hell of a long time. And so I finally put one together that wasn't too expensive, and I broke it in. It was like, you got to break speakers in before you really turn them up, you know?
Yeah.
So broke it in, just casually listening to some music I was really familiar with. Now, I have this like quirk, right? That sometimes there's like legendary albums, and if I haven't heard them yet, I want to listen to them for the very first time tripping, and I want to listen to them ideally on a really good system, so I can have the whole staging and everything and have the whole experience of the record without like, if you listen to it for the first time like that, you haven't got any memories attached to the music whatsoever. So the music just takes you where it wants to take you because the music isn't attached to anything else, right, in your head. And so like, for example, I didn't listen to Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix until 2015. There's a whole bunch of albums that I deliberately save until I have either the right company and or the right headspace and sound system or whatever. So there's and in 1995, Prince did this 5 CD set called Crystal Ball. 3 of the CDs were like previously unreleased material. 1 CD was this acoustic album called The Truth, and the other CD was some sort of opera that Prince did, I think, for Carmen Electra or something like that. I can't remember. But the 5 CD set in Britain was like £59. And back then for me, I was a single parent on benefits, and £59 was almost a week's worth of money to me. So there's no way I could buy that album back in the day. And they never, once they did the initial release, they never replenished it. So once all the original copies were in the stores were sold, that was it. So they're kind of rare. And then obviously after Prince died, the Prince estate is going through the vault and trying to figure out what albums are viable. He's like already produced and made and everything. And there's been a few, but they had The Truth there, and they put The Truth on vinyl for the first time ever. And I've been wanting to listen to The Truth for 25 years, but I've never been able to afford the Crystal Ball CD. And also, quite frankly, I would have preferred to have it on record. And I saw it on record just quite by chance. And I'm like, oh, I'm pouncing on that motherfucker, right? So I bought it, and then I saved it for a month. I broke my stereo in first for a little while. And then on Thursday, I had a nice light trip, and I put on my music, man. I'll tell you what, it's just so, I can't even describe when you've had 25 years of anticipation, right? It's a damn good thing that album didn't suck. That's all I've got to say. Because if I waited that long and it turned out to be weak sauce, I would have been really pissed off, man.
Man, you got me thinking about how great it is to just sit down and listen to music with friends. It's been a long time since, and it's always good. You both have at least somewhat similar tastes, and it can be almost as good as watching a movie, you know?
Oh man, to me sometimes better than watching a movie. And yeah, I did it by myself this weekend, or sorry, this week just gone, which was fine. But just I spent 8 hours just sitting there listening to music, not looking at my phone or my laptop or any distractions, just chilling, listening to music and letting it take me wherever. It was absolutely fucking great. And I kind of feel like I'm one of the dying breed of people who just sits down and listens to music with nothing else to do.
Well, I mean, but it's really great though when you can enjoy it with a friend and you have a particular memory to attach it to, with and not just analyzing the music.
Oh, I totally dig that, man. Yeah. And back in the old ecstasy 80s, that's something I did quite a lot with friends. And, those albums are sort of like burned in all of our minds as a bonding experience, But yeah.
I've heard of a parallel that's going to go along with this.
Yeah.
I talk to 100 people a week, right? A few of them are watching the baseball World Series right now. And I remember when I was in high school, how like 4 years in a row in football, the Buffalo Bills, they lost the Super Bowl. And the Atlanta Braves were about to do the same thing in the World Series.
Right.
And the last time they won the World Series was while I was in high school. And right now they're in the World Series again. This is the first time they've been back.
Right.
About the same amount of time that you've been waiting for this album. So things are
right. That's a thought.
Coming full circle in the world.
Right.
Old is new.
Well, I mean, when you've never heard something before, it's new to you, right? And yeah, but honestly, I didn't even know you could play acoustic guitar like that. I mean, the level of talent that Prince possessed it's humbling. You listen to it and you're just like, fuck me, man. I've never been that good at anything. Not tying my shoe. You know what I mean? Fucking hell.
Yeah. What I liked about Prince was that he didn't throw out what I would call guitar masturbation scales. For me, Yngwie Malmsteen and
I was about to mention Yngwie when you said that.
Steve Vai is also really bad about that, like just making up a solo off the cuff.
Joe Satriani does it as well.
Yeah, true.
Where it's just this constant din of like 16th notes moving around a scale. Alan Holdsworth does that a lot too.
Yeah. I would say Prince always brings the feeling that's missing from Steve Vai. He's got the ability to play a scale, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I haven't heard it, but you can't put the feeling in and not be able to and have that prowess and not be able to play the same scales that those other guitar masturbationists do. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But he's a league ahead of them.
Oh man, I mean, yeah.
And completely underrated as a guitarist at the same time.
Well, for a long time, and then all of a sudden everybody seemed to realize, I don't know when Prince went from national pariah to national treasure, but it happened sometime between 1984, national pariah, and 2007, playing the Super Bowl in the rain, right? Mm-hmm. He was a national treasure by 2007. I mean, everybody fucking liked Prince by then, right? And for him, I don't know if you've ever seen that performance, but I mean, it's fucking pissing with rain, and they're putting a full-on show like it's a sunny day. It's amazing. But anyway,
just laughing at your pissing with rain. I just never heard that expression before.
All right, it's a British expression. It's one of my carryovers. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, but because in 1984, Purple Rain came out, and I don't know how many of y'all remember, because I know about this because I was on the radio, so I'm not sure whether it was talked about much elsewhere. But Prince is the reason they started putting those parental advisory labels on records. Do you guys know about that?
Was he even on that list of 15?
Darling Nikki.
Darling Nikki, that's exactly right. Raven knows the story. So Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, was, I guess, making breakfast for their girls. I guess they got 4 daughters. And they asked if they could listen to Purple Rain while she's making breakfast. And she's like, well, that's an award-winning album. Sure, go ahead and put it on. It's won Oscars and Grammys. It must be good, she was thinking. So they put it on, and then Darling Nikki comes on, and the song has the lyric, the girl was masturbating with a magazine, and Tipper Gore freaked out, created the Parents Music Resource Commission, and then we had John Denver and the guy from Twisted Sister and Frank Zappa in Congress trying to defend freedom in music and not having any kind of warning labels, because they wanted to label albums like they label movies. Some would be 17, some would be 12 or whatever, but they ended up going for those parental advisory things. And it's like the Streisand effect. All of a sudden, now you can swear as liberally as you want to, but you'll get a sticker. And the sticker turned out to be a fucking sales gimmick. It actually sold more records, you know? And I just think it's hilarious that that was the ultimate result of it. It actually sold more records. And to the point, more records with obscenities in them.
And they made that list, the Filthy 15, of all these songs that we're supposed to be horrified by. And Prince was actually on the list twice because he wrote Sheena Easton's song that showed up on the list. The Sugar Walls song.
Yeah, Sheena Easton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was why I listened to that Sugar Walls song. And at first I was like, I don't see what's so bad about this. And then the lyrics kind of kick in. You're like, oh, that's what the Sugar Walls are.
Sure.
So I wonder how they would have reacted to WAP.
Oh yeah. There are some people that the battle lines they drew are far crossed. Even Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back would probably be something that would give them a heart attack.
Yeah.
Deep Ashtray says in the comment section that Prince became a national treasure after Purple Rain. I think it was way later than that. I think it's way later than that, because that was the peak of his pop fame, I suppose. I don't really know, because I was gone for the 90s. And in my opinion, Prince's music in the 90s is better than Prince's music in the 80s by miles and miles and miles. But I know Purple Rain was like the first crossover album, that, as it were. You know what I mean? It was a rock album for sure. Yeah. But have anybody else here, since we're talking about Prince, and Kazoom, a few years ago, I think right after Prince died, maybe even, you made a video on your channel and you mentioned that you didn't like most of his music after the turn of the century. But have you listened to the Lotus Flower?
I haven't yet. No. Wow.
All right. The Lotus Flower is like a 3 CD album. And the middle album is called The Lotus Flower. And there's it's a rock album for the most part. And the guitar playing on it is worth the price of admission all by itself. It's the best guitar playing on any of the albums, with possible exception of The Truth that I just listened to the other day. But yeah, no, seriously, it's amazing. And there's one song on particular called, I think it's called The Dreamer, that he's totally like obviously Hendrixing it away on purpose. It's very much got a Hendrixy kind of vibe. But my favorite song on that album is Colonized Mind. And the fact that album came out like in 2007 and it's still got relevant songs like that is pretty cool.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
There was
I feel bad about that video. I gotta say, I was, man, it just, you went right to it. I was like, before you said it, I was saying to myself, oh man, I hope no one saw that video that I made back. And then there you mentioned it, I'm like, because I was kind of negative towards Prince in that, and it just, I think I deleted that video a long time ago.
There was an award show where they had an all-star jam, and Prince was in the band in the one of the all-stars. He was playing guitar, and he just like blew everybody on stage away. It was just like he just basically took over. It became the Prince show.
I think you're talking about the induction of George Harrison into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah, and it had.
So I'll give you some trivia about that.
Everybody else was on stage.
Yeah, I'll give you some trivia about that video, right? Because I know these things. So originally, you got on stage, you got Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty, who, along with George Harrison and Roy Orbison and Bob Dylan, were in the Traveling Wilburys. So these people were all good friends of George Harrison. And you had Steve Winwood on keyboards, who used to play and hang out with George Harrison back in the 60s and 70s. So Tom Petty, who's a good friend of Prince when they were both alive, suggested to Olivia, is like, listen, we want to do the final guitar solo by Prince. And she's like, well, George and Prince never knew each other. I just want, people who knew George on stage. And Tom's like, Olivia, trust me. So they put him on stage, and he's obviously been saved for the final guitar solo, right? And when you watch the video, she's off camera, but she's off to the stage over there on the side, on the left side, and you can see him looking over to her, going, ah! It's hilarious. And at the end of the song, he just throws his guitar up in the air, and there's obviously somebody with a net who catches the guitar off camera. He just throws it up. He's like, fucking nailed it. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorite performances of guitar playing on video I've ever seen. It's great.
Right on.
Yeah. But I think I'm pretty sure she was happy to have him there after the performance. You know what I mean? Because that guitar solo at the end of that song brings the whole song to a different level. Yeah. Oh, Deep Ashtray also mentions Prince was a world-class drummer, which no one ever mentions. I saw Prince live 4 times, and 3 of those times he played the drums.
Okay.
I think he quite liked playing the drums. He could play like more than 20 instruments proficiently, which is...
It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean... I suppose, I don't know, Kazum, you're a musician, right? So, I mean, like, because you know something about playing music, you could probably, even if you can't play something you've never played before, I mean, if someone gave you a tuba, you could probably figure out, like, notes.
Yeah, I mean, I can tinker around and figure out and create create a song with whatever that is, because sometimes a new instrument will automatically make you come up with different patterns and such, but to be proficient in playing so many instruments, that's just amazing,
I got my kid Devin. He writes music. He's a musician. He can write music for just about any instrument, and he can play almost anything with strings. He writes really amazing drum pieces, but he can't play.
Right.
And it's unusual to be able to write music for the drums and not be able to play the drums, but it's about coordination, and he doesn't have the coordination to do it, but he knows how to write the music, and he writes amazing drum pieces. And I mean, he's got like a YouTube channel where he puts all of his music, and all of the music is him. It's written and performed and all put together. It's by him, and I've actually done the whole thing where I kind of was like jabbing at him, calling him like, what do you like, Prince? He's not a Prince fan, so he'd like roll his eyes at me. But yeah.
Well, I mean, you must be pretty proud of that, because that sort of, it's not just having talent to do that. It's also the dedication involved, and you got to put your nose to the grindstone to make an album.
I'm very, 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 very proud. He's got a whole bunch of releases out. He's got followers, not like, thousands of followers or anything like that, but he's got followers of his music all over the world. So it's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. If I ever had any talent, I would have been fucking dangerous, guys. You know what I mean? I would have, yeah. But sadly, my only talent is dancing. That's it. and you don't get paid for that. Well, you can, I suppose, but I didn't want to get paid for that. Yeah. Anyway, I was just to finish up on Prince real quick. I mean, Prince is one of the few people who actually made true solo albums, you know, where literally all the voices and music was played by Prince. And also the production was produced by Prince, you know what I mean? And the arrangements and everything. I can't
hold on. Was it at that point, was it the artist formerly known as Prince and the symbol?
Well, no, I mean, his first two albums were all him. And the Dirty Mind album is almost all him. The Controversy album is almost all him. 1999 is almost all him, you know. It's really Purple Rain is the first one where the musicians are all playing the instruments other than him in the actual recording of the album. Yeah, and I was just listening the other day. I've got musicology on vinyl, and I was just looking at the liner notes, and it's like all lyrics, voices, and music instruments performed by Prince. And I'm just like, man, how did the guy ever find the time? I mean, I read that Prince wrote and recorded a song every day for years. So there must be literally thousands of songs, you know. They can't all be good, right? And nobody can write that many great songs. So maybe that's why there's a vault, so the crap doesn't get out.
There's a similar thing that was said about Nirvana, but a lot of their songs went in the bin. They had a filter for that. And You Know You're Right was one of those songs that was supposed to be the feature of the next album. And they fought after Kurt died. They fought for like 20 years about that particular song.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why it took so long to come out to radio. Was because that song everyone knew it was a hit. But there was a whole bunch of them because they did write something every day and record something every day on the tour bus and everything. There's a whole bunch that went in the bin because they were, filtering for greatness.
I know my kid has his computer is open 24/7 with the editing for the music, and he's got like all kinds of stuff saved that he'll never use. He's got little bits of songs that sometimes he ends up editing them together to make a single piece out of. I mean, when he's not at work, he's doing something with music. He's either writing it in his head or he's at home putting it down. But yeah, it's constant.
Man,
Yeah, I was just saying, Kazumbo has an experience like that.
Oh yeah, there's so many. There's so many songs that I have little, like you write about 30 seconds worth of a song, and then you can't think of anything more, so you put it aside, and just tons and tons of those. But I was just thinking about how I would love to hear Prince's musical experimentations, the stuff that he would never be something that you'd want to release on pop radio. Just the stuff where he's just like, well, what would this sound like if I did this? Those kind of. I would love to hear that because you'd get to know more about how he creates.
I actually have a bootleg CD of such material, and I also think that if memory serves me right, the 5 CD set Crystal Ball, which came out with The Truth, like I was mentioning before, 3 of those CDs were previously unreleased material, and a lot of it is just studio tracks that are 35 seconds, or whatever. Just little bits, little ideas, what about this riff? What about that sort of phrasing and blah, blah, blah. It's interesting.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So in this Smashing Pumpkins box set, The Aeroplane Flies High, they had a moment where they put together about 25 minutes of this last song on this one. It's called the Pistachio Medley, where they took all the riffs that were they sounded good, but they just couldn't turn them into songs. They just went one big long song of a whole bunch of different sounds, and there is some great creativity there. They just threw it all together in one thing and put it out and said, "It's our brain is free. We don't have to keep those on the back burner. They're out. You know what the song little tidbit sounded like? Have at it."
That's pretty interesting. You know, I've heard of the Smashing Pumpkins, but I'm not sure if I've ever heard the Smashing Pumpkins.
Well, it's pretty hard to completely avoid ever hearing something of theirs, but yeah, it's
Smashing Pumpkins is really just the one guy. What's his face? Billy Corgan. Right.
Up until Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness in the 90s, all the songs were written and recorded by him. Pretty much, the band was just there to tour with him, and then here and there he allowed some of the other bandmates to write certain parts on other albums. But that was actually a big sticking point as to why they've had little breakups here and there, because he was making all the money.
Well, yeah, there wasn't there at one point there was some kind of a thing. Their biggest album. What was the name of their biggest album?
I'd say Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Okay, so wasn't there a thing where they were like apart when he wrote that? Like he basically did the whole thing and then called the band back together and said, "Hey, here's our album. Deal with it."
And a lot of the work was done by him and never re-recorded over. And then little by little, he's allowed them into like the full band experience. But him and Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails have the same approach. Like it's not going to sound the same if it's a collaboration. I'm going to have total control over everything, and then maybe let people in.
My kid is like, yeah, my kid is like that too. He does like the Trent Reznor style where it's all him. Everything is him. Mm-hmm. From writing to performing to producing, all the way through, he does it. He does it all. He did do recently a collaboration with some internet personality who is kind of famous for music, EmoBot 9000 or something like that. It's called. And he did a collaboration with them. So, but other than that, it's like 99%. It's him. Control freak.
Well, I mean, when it comes to music, I mean, it depends on how precious you are, I guess, in your attitude about what you've written. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the Beatles movie Let It Be. You ever seen it? There's an argument where Paul McCartney is telling George Harrison, no, the guitar is supposed to go like this, and plays it. And George Harrison's like, I'm the fucking guitarist. Don't tell me how to play the fucking guitar, you know? And that was when the Beatles were on the verge of breaking up, as you might be aware. And so I think that's a kind of classic band problem, though. You know, if a band has a band leader, especially if the band leader is also writing the songs, how not to be a control freak is an art form. I mean, you know, how do you just let the rest of the band do their own thing with your creation? And some bands, I think, that clearly do that, and I marvel at it. That's my favorite thing about Tool, for example. But what were you going to say, Raven? You look like you're chewing. I thought you were waiting to speak. Okay.
You're making me think about bands I've been in that have had two guitarists. You have the lead guitarist and you have the rhythm guitarist, and sometimes the arguments between the two of them is just, that's typical. That's very typical. So
I was filling in a band called Road Rage in Colorado Springs. This is over 20 years ago. And I showed up to practice one day, and the bassist pawned his bass amp for weed. This was before weed was legal here in Colorado. He was getting a giant stash of weed so that he could then, break it apart, sell it, be a low-level drug dealer, and then get his money back. But it was all part of a big drug deal that he was doing. And it was at that moment I realized my dedication to this band that I was not even an original member of was more than one of the original members. And I never again wanted to play in a band where I didn't own every instrument.
Right.
And it wasn't about like the songwriting credits at that point. It was like, I can't trust people to have the gear to show up with. I want to have a room in my house where I have all the gear set up. We can practice, and I will own everything, or else I'll keep my hands on it until the day we go on a stage. I'm not gonna, a month prior to a show, have somebody have pawned their bass amp.
Wow. I'm Deep Ashtray in the comment section mentions Yes, and Deep Ashtray, I was already aware that Yes is like pretty much my favorite band. Certainly my favorite rock band. And I have a question. Okay. Back in 1980, I think, maybe 81, Yes put out an album called Drama, and it had a new lead singer on it. Now, bands change instrument players relatively frequently, especially guitarists and drummers, right? You can, a lot of times you don't even know that they've changed the drummer sometimes, but changing the lead singer is a pretty bold move. And then on the next album, of course, they changed it back to the original guy. But since John Anderson's got too old to do it, they now have new singers. And there's like one original member left in the band who isn't even an original member. All the original members are no longer in the band. And I mean, like Rick Wakeman once said, as a joke, I thought at the time, this is like the late 80s, that he envisages Yes playing in 50, 100 years, that the band members are just going to keep changing and changing. And I'm like, is it still Yes anymore? Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
I'm reminded of Kiss.
Say that again?
I'm reminded of Kiss.
Kiss, right.
They've had probably almost a dozen members at this point.
Have they? I did not know that.
They had a lot. Yeah, they've had a lot. They changed. It's the only two original, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are the only two that have remained through. The other guys have all been swapping out.
I didn't know that. Yeah. It's a tricky one. I mean, I remember when John Bonham died in 1980 or 81, the drummer for Led Zeppelin, and the band announced that Led Zeppelin was going to disband because it's not Led Zeppelin without John Bonham. And I just thought that was like super, super, super cool. There's very few bands that keep all their original members. And especially for an extended period of time. I think the longest band to keep its original members is ZZ Top.
Okay.
I think it's been the same three guys since like 1972 or 3 or something like that. Rush, it's a Canadian band, but Rush had the same members ever since their second album. So their first album had a different guy, and then they got the new guy in their second album, and then it was the same three guys for 50 fucking years. But I think U2 is another band that retains its original members. All four of them, and considering how fantastically wealthy that band is, and what the kind of work they used to do in their world tours was, legendary. It's kind of amazing to me those guys have never broke up. I know they came close a couple times, like in the early 90s.
Yeah. So AC/DC just put out a music video a month ago because Angus Young died. And they had a CGI Angus Young in the music video. And in the end, there's like this scene in heaven with Bon Scott and Angus Young are up there, So they're paying homage to the original singer as well. Brian Johnson is right there in the song, and they're still like, yeah, those two have gone on, but
it's interesting that the Highway to Hell guys are in heaven. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just Highway to Hell; it's Hell's Bells and a whole bunch of other songs. You know what I mean? It's hilarious.
And I really felt like that Through the Mists of Time song was them saying, "This is it. This is the end of the band." This is a good stamp on it all. Here's some fan service. Here's your picture of them two in heaven, and we're done.
Well, Brian Johnson is a rare example of changing the lead singer and the band going on to maintain not just success. I mean, like the first album he was on was Back in Black. And I think that's like the third most sold album in the world. I think only after Michael Jackson Thriller and the Eagles' Greatest Hits.
I think Van Halen versus Van Hagar is another good example. But then Van Halen 3, where they brought in Gary Cherone from Extreme, nobody wants to remember that shit.
I didn't even know about that. I was abroad and not really into that sort of genre anymore.
If you look up the album Van Halen 3, it's horrible. it's like
most of the Van Hagar stuff is too, though. I wasn't a huge fan of the Van Hagar period. I mean, there were some good things that came out of it, but overall, I don't like Sammy Hagar.
Well, I like the 5150 album. I got to say, I like every single song on that record, but I'm not really too familiar with the rest of their stuff. You know, after Hagar, I saw them live at the Monsters of Rock the same night. I saw Metallica and the Scorpions and Dokken, and they were great. Don't get me wrong, but I kind of would have preferred to see Van Halen with the David Lee Roth. You know, back in the day, I think as long as it was one of the shows where he could remember the lyrics. Because oftentimes David Lee Roth would get so fucking wasted that he would forget the songs, you know, and then laugh about it on stage like we're supposed to think it's hilarious that we paid fucking all this money to watch you fucking slobber around drunk. Do you know what I mean?
A couple of years ago, David Lee Roth was at a hotel, and there was like, you know, young people and a party going on, and you know, it was almost like the old school 80s type parties. And he like invited himself in, and he pretty much got laughed out. There's a guy who the party is over, and he just refuses to accept it.
I would say for me, I appreciate when Anthrax had John Bush as their lead singer more than Joey Belladonna, the original one, and it was a completely different sound to their music. It wasn't the camp or glam to their rock anymore. It was more it was grungier and more metal. And then the last time I saw them, Joey Belladonna's back with them because it's the Nostalgia tour,
right?
You know, so they just take John Bush. They're like, yeah, you know, we want to sell tickets. Put in Joey so we can sell tickets and have the radio say original lineup.
I hated John Bush.
He's my favorite.
I can't stand any of the stuff with him at all. I hate him as a singer. I hated the music that they made when he was the singer. I don't own it. I said, fuck it. I've tried. I listened to it on like YouTube to see if I could like it, and I despise it. So, you know, I will never own it. And to me, if Joey, and I got Fistful of Metal. And while I like musically, I like that album, I don't like their original singer either. So I own that album and I never listened to it. And
Joe woke up and chose violence this morning.
So, hi, Joe.
Hi.
Happy birthday,
Hey, Joe.
Thank you.
I understand that it is a subjective, stylistic choice that I'm making there. Because I know a lot more people wanted to see Joey Belladonna. That's why they brought him back for the Nostalgia tour to sell tickets, because that's who people wanted to see.
Well,
the original lineup.
And actually, I mean, Worship Music and For All Kings. I mean, I think those two albums are actually their best albums. You know, especially Worship Music. That album is like a masterpiece. I didn't even know they were capable of being that good, quite frankly. And I've liked the band since the 80s, but I heard that and I was like, because a lot of bands that I liked from the 80s and 90s, and then they just put out a lot of garbage in like the mid to late 90s and the 2000s, and they're just like surviving on nostalgia. But that album was legit, like kick ass. It really fucking burned me to the ground. One album I was listening to the show a little earlier. One band you're talking about bands that tried to find ways to deal with to let the other members be creative was Kiss. where they had each person got their own album. If you remember, there was the 4 albums that were like with the face of one person on it, and that was brilliant because it's okay, fine. You have your head, do what the fuck you want. If it sells, great. If it doesn't, all right. We got more albums coming out of us.
Yes did the same thing in the 70s as well. They all put out solo albums at the same time because they were getting kind of sick of each other. And so they all thought, hey, let's do our own thing and then we'll appreciate each other more, which pretty much what happened.
Well, the things with Kiss, though, these weren't solo albums. They were Kiss albums, but they were written and produced by a different member of the band in each case.
I thought they were solo albums.
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was kind of sharp because I think what it is like somebody has an idea, I want to do it, the other band members don't want to do it, then you're stuck, or the person because really that band is Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. They own the band. Everybody else is an employee. But so by giving other people the opportunity to express their creativity together. So it actually made the band more cohesive, at least for a while. But and the guys they kicked out initially, so like Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, it was really because of drugs, because these guys were not, they had problems, and it was kind of funny. I mean, what do you call it? Not Paul Stanley. I just said his name.
Ace Frehley.
No. The bass player.
Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons. He's always been very serious. He's not a big druggie. And he's always been very dedicated. So he just got tired of guys that would show up drunk and not do their job.
The thing is, I mean, even with that, like Gene Simmons is nobody can ever question his seriousness from a business perspective. None of them were ever really very talented musicians. They knew how to do what they could do, and they took every possible different limit that they could take it.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why, if you heard a Kiss song, you've heard all Kiss songs. Or at least for a good period of time, because there was a point in the mid to late 80s where all of a sudden there was a musical change, and it was like they completely changed the direction. And it was like, holy shit, somebody taught them how to play the instruments, because this is real music. But they were really good at selling themselves, and that's Gene Simmons. I mean, he is a whore. He sold that band on every corner he could get it on, and that was one of the ways that they built their army. And again, that's something else. The whole Kiss Army thing. Gene Simmons is a marketing genius, because when you can take a semi-talented band and make it one of the biggest acts on the planet, your talent is in marketing.
Well, I am of the age that sort of I was in high school when Kiss was at its zenith, right? And I used to
They're still going. They're still going
at their zenith. Anyway, I was I used to. I'm sure y'all might have done the same thing. I used to buy albums for the most part based on the cover. Not necessarily if I go, hey, that's a cool cover, I wonder what that music is like, and I'd buy the record. But there's some bands that I didn't do that with. The Grateful Dead, Kiss, Alice Cooper. And Kiss and Alice Cooper in particular, I didn't do that with. For that matter, same thing with the Grateful Dead, because their fans were fucking idiots as far as I was concerned, and I didn't want to be associated with their fans. So I never went to because certainly where I was from, if you mentioned the Kiss Army, Raven, these guys were just, they acted like Kiss was the only band that ever fucking existed. That's literally how their attitude was. If you didn't understand music.
I actually like Kiss. And I know it sounds like I was bashing them before. I wasn't. I mean, considering that their musical talent was very limited, they did amazing things with that limited amount of talent. They really, really did. I mean, I actually always liked Kiss. There's like certain songs like Great Expectations. I think that was an amazing song by Kiss. Beth, as cliche as that may sound, Beth is an amazing song. I mean, a rock band with guys with like 8-inch heels and thick, heavy, kabuki theater face makeup playing French horns. What the fuck?
See, my favorite Kiss song is "Live It Loud."
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, Live It Loud. Right.
And
What was the other one? On the Eighth Day, that was a good one too. On the Eighth Day, God created rock and roll.
yes. Yeah, and our God gave rock and roll to you.
God, yeah. Deuce. Oh my God, Deuce in Now, I never saw them in concert. I wish, but I did have. There was a Kiss put out a video. It was like an at-home kind of a thing. You went to Paul Stanley's house, and there's like women in their panties and topless all over the place, like passed out in like every room. And it was like, he's just walking around like it's his furniture. And they would play videos and concert clips, and one of the clips was Deuce in concert, and it was just like the show they did for that song was just fucking amazing. When they had all the guitarists all lined up, all moving. Coordinated, very choreographed, and it was just like it was really, really good. I wish I had seen them in concert. I don't know.
I wish I was more open-minded about it when I was in high school. I was too sort of like caught up in like I don't want to be one of those guys that was the Kiss Army guy. I didn't want to be associated with him. I didn't want to, but I mean, I could have gone to the concert anonymously. Right? I didn't have to go with any of these people that I knew who were like devotees, for lack of a better word. And I just want to mention a minute ago.
Morons.
Morons. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got their own quirks in music. I sure do. Right. And that's okay. There's no such thing as bad taste in music. I might not like someone else's taste in music, but to them, it's good taste in music. And so, I mean, I don't like pickles either, but plenty of people eat them. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
you don't play like pickles. We're all done, man. I'm
There's a lot of the people who watch the show. A lot of our followers are younger than us, Paul. Some are around our age.
My age, yeah.
Some of them will know. Some of them will understand what I'm about to say here. There's like, if somebody ever mentions like to me the late 70s, one of the first things that comes to mind is the Kiss Army, and just that whole look that the average Kiss fan kind of had, because they all had the same haircut and they all dressed the same
haircut.
Yeah, the Wayne's World haircut. I mean, and just if anybody ever mentions late 70s, that's what I think of. It's one of the things I think of. That, and for some reason, the Life cereal commercial, with Mikey.
He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
Yeah.
They ran that commercial for 25 fucking years.
Yeah, I
first saw that when I was a little kid, Mikey's age myself. And it was the same kid.
Yep.
Well, I just saw the Tootsie Roll commercial from actually my Suzanne said that commercial was around when she was young.
Wow. So the animated owl with the graduate's hat on, licking it 3 times and then biting into it. Yep. I don't know what you're talking about, Joe.
they do still run that commercial. Not often. I don't see it often, but every now and then it's on.
I just saw it a couple days ago.
Wow.
I guess the Mikey commercial first aired, I guess, in 1972.
Wow.
I remember that first run.
I was 1.
I was 4.
I was this many.
You was this man.
Wow. Joe, you and Michael were talking about Anthrax a little while ago. And I'm really not a huge fan of that type of metal, although there are some bands that are exceptions. I've only listened to one Anthrax album and I didn't like it. So I haven't really given them any more of a fair shot than that. But I mean,
which one?
I can't even remember. It was on vinyl, if that helps, but it was an old one from way back in the day. I think it might've been their first or second album. Anyway, but I find it interesting because when it comes to really hardcore metal, whether it's black metal or death metal or however people want to quantify it, I don't even necessarily understand the difference. All I know is there's some that I like and there's some that I don't like. And what I find interesting for myself, and I'm curious to people, because Joe, you're a genuine fan of the genre as opposed to just liking the odd band or the odd songs from bands. I find that I really, really like Pantera, and I find that I really, really like Nile.
I don't know. Nile.
Nothing similar about either of those bands, right? But for some reason, there's just something about those two bands where you're like, fuck yeah. Do you know what I mean? Whereas other bands that I've tried to listen to, what's that one? It's a Morbid Angel. I think I used to listen to, and some of it's pretty good, but a lot of it, I'm just like, turn it off. Do you know what I mean? I find it really weird how it doesn't always agree with me. So when you're a fan of the genre, what is it for you? Is it the complication? Because a lot of that music is very complicated and extremely, well produced.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say it's a few things. Metal, in general, is the music of angst. And so, like a great example is, two songs, the original, you see the song Turn the Page, the original Bob Seger song, which captures the loneliness of the road, but Metallica captures the angst.
Right.
And as a angsty person, and I've been angsty, like I remember when I first discovered metal, I had been listening to like top 40, like I used to listen to Casey Kasem every Sunday to listen to America's Top 40. And I remember 81 and 83 were two particular years, but 83 was a seminal year for me because not only did I like the top 40 stuff that came out, but that was the year I discovered metal. And they said there were like 3 or 4 songs that did it. It was Iron Maiden, Flight of Icarus, Ozzy, Bark at the Moon, and Dio, Rainbow in the Dark. And I was just like, whoa, where has this been my whole life? Because I was an unhappy, angsty teen, and this is music that actually spoke to me for the first time. I mean, before this music I liked, but this really, really hit me. It struck a chord in me. I love the distortion. I was saying this, it was funny because a friend of mine posted the other day like some ASMR video. And it was like making sounds with food, and they were like opening the box and scratching the box and all that. And I listened to that, and it actually like set up discordance and dissonance in my head and made me angry and hostile. This is supposed to make you like calm and peaceful and happy, and I was ready to like smash my head against the wall. But I there's something.
But put on Slayer and everything's fine, right?
Is that?
Put on Slayer and everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something, yes, yes, Proctor, I do know, except, there's something about that really kind of feeds me. And it's weird because that it's the kind of, that noise, it's dissonance and it's discordant, but that actually appeals to me, and it always has. So now, and then mind you, I like a good, metal ballad and stuff like too. The other thing, or someone's singing nicely and if they're playing nicely, but mostly like that. That's what really gets me about that. I mentioned that one Anthrax album, one of the more recent ones, Worship Music. I mean, that's one of their heaviest ones, and it just comes right out of the box and just grabs you by, reaches down your throat and grabs your heart and rips it out of your body.
And that's a good thing.
And that's a good thing. So I think that's where it really, and the thing is, a lot if you read a lot of the words are about pain. There's like what's become my favorite Alice in Chains. I mean, Alice in Chains writes most of their stuff about pain as it is. Mm-hmm. But what's become my favorite album of theirs is the Rainier Fog album, and it's if you listen to, like, there's Deaf Ears, Eyes Blind, that's one name that kind of just drives, and it's up and down, and the way they have two people singing, so with their voices, and they're doing a 2-part harmony, and cross voices at times, and what they're doing is it just grabs you, and it's very emotional. So yeah, that's really what does it for me.
That's interesting.
And while there are other genres of music where there's pieces I like, there's no one genre that I like enough that I like really get a lot of other music. So most of my collection is metal. But then I have the occasional like flock of seagulls.
Well, every time I go to St. Louis, the main radio station we listen to when we're driving is like an 80s radio station. And it's an interesting thing to me. It's also something I notice when I go to the cafes or restaurants in St. Louis. There's always music in the background, and very often it's classic music from the 80s. And to me that's the, I don't know, just 80s music doesn't feel like it should be called classic to me, but that's just a different story.
Funny thing about 80s music, though, when it's on the radio or when there's a collection or something, it is really not representative of 80s music. It's always, I have the music I listen to is very all over the place. Like I on my iPod, I've got everything from like, Metallica and Megadeth to Madonna and Cyndi Lauper. I mean, and like everything, and Alan Jackson. It's a little bit of country music in there. So I got all kinds of stuff. And it's funny. It's like kind of like just today, I stopped at someone's house, a friend's house around the corner. I left the car running, and when I got back in the car, Like a Virgin was playing, and I just kind of chuckled to myself that I never really listened to that song in full, the entire song, probably since like the mid '80s. That is, every time it's on, it's always in the background.
Right.
But that's one of the examples of something that people say, "Oh, '80s music, Madonna is '80s music." But it's like, but Metallica, "Kill 'Em All" came out in 1981. I mean, at the same time that Like a Virgin and She Bop was a big, Master of Puppets, I think, came out around the time that She Bop.
Yeah,
Right.
86. Yeah.
And Master of Puppets is one of the, in my opinion. I mean, you want to talk about like art, right? I mean, that album is art. That's a work of art. And you don't hear that when people talk about 80s music. You're not putting forward, Sanitarium as an example of 80s music, or Fade to Black, or Anthrax, I'm the Man. When I'm the Man, I love I'm the Man. It's a fantastic song. I don't care what anybody thinks. I think that song is amazing.
You're also not putting on those 80s compilation albums, at least not in my experience, is any hip hop at all. I think it's possibly You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party by the Beastie Boys, and maybe Walk This Way with Run DMC and Aerosmith. Other than that, I don't think I've ever seen any sort of hip hop songs on an 80s compilation, unless it's a hip hop compilation.
Well, and the irony of Fight for Your Right to Party is that they did that song parodying that idea. Like basically they were like kind of taking a shot at like low speed, basically, first world problems, white people, and then it became a party anthem, and they're like, oh no.
Yeah. Raven, we've got a classic rock station in my town. The first thing that I heard on that station was actually Guns N' Roses, and I was horrified that had made it to classic rock. But
Right.
It depends on what your definition, like how far back do you think something can go before it becomes classic?
Here's the thing though, Mike. I think about like when I was the music that just the early 80s, mid 80s metal music, the songs that were considered oldies but goodies, which were basically late 50s to mid 60s songs, those songs are closer to Master of Puppets than we are today. So those stuff from those 80s songs are older than the oldies but goodies. So, I mean, it's just hard to fathom that's like, 35, 40 years ago, but, it is.
So the contemporary radio station for metal in my town will play things from Led Zeppelin and from Black Sabbath from the 70s.
Because the reason for that, though, is because those are the foundations of the metal that we would be playing.
Right.
Sure. That reminds me, I was going to make the point a minute ago that this whole classic rock or just classic pop radio thing that goes on in America doesn't happen in the UK at all. I mean, you might be listening to Radio 1 and you might hear some song here and there from the 90s or the 80s or maybe even the 70s. They might dig a few out here and there. But for the most part, you don't get radio stations that's their genre. That's what they play. It just doesn't happen. People don't want to look backwards. They want to look forwards. They want to be in the now. And most of the radio stations that I've been exposed to over there don't have even like oldies hours or anything like that. You know what I mean? Or like an oldies show for like one DJ just plays oldies, and nothing like that. They might slip them in every once in a while, you know, but other than, I mean, like, and because of that, like when I first moved to the UK, which is the late 80s, a lot of people just like 10 years younger than me weren't really familiar with the Beatles because they didn't play it on the radio anymore.
Wow.
Whereas when I was a kid, they played the Beatles. I mean, when I started DJing, we played the Beatles on my pop station, and that was the early 80s. You know, we still played the Beatles like all the time, you know, because they were super popular still, even though they were, you know, defunct for 13, 14 years, you know?
Wow.
And that's another thing you mentioned about Led Zeppelin. When I was a brand new DJ, my first 3 radio stations, this didn't just happen at one radio station. The first 3 radio stations I worked for, not an exaggeration, every single day, at least once in a day, someone would call up and request Stairway to Heaven. Every day. Every day. Regardless of what time I was on the clock, wouldn't matter what time of day I was on or night, whatever. And so it's happening to me. It's happening to the other DJs as well on my station, surely, right? And you're thinking,
I know our local station. Well, there's I think there's 3. We have 3 local ones now. On 2 of them, they play a lot of like stuff for this. They call it, you know, classic hits from yesterday and today kind of thing.
right.
And they both have certain times a day where they play Led Zeppelin, where it's like, you know, at 5 o'clock every day, you know, come get the lead out is what they call it.
And what song do you think is more overplayed, Hotel California or Stairway to Heaven?
Oh,
Stairway to Heaven.
It's close, but yeah, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah,
but I would say the Eagles are like a close second.
I mean, I like both of them, and I will listen to both of them almost every time they play them.
Both those songs I can't help but sing if it comes on, and I can't really sing most songs, but I can carry those ones off.
Well, see, the thing is,
It's burned into my brain.
I've actually reached the point now where I actually don't like either song because they've been so overplayed. I got tired of them.
I'm going to go with the Eagles in my life because Stairway to Heaven was so played out by the time I started listening to the radio that I didn't hear it as much. And there was that joke in the Wayne's World movie about, you know, no playing Stairway to Heaven in the guitar store. So, like, I didn't understand that joke.
Right.
Generation before me that did understand it. For me, 9 Inch Nails' Closer is the most played out song. I've heard it so many times on so many different stations.
I'm not sure I know that song.
Oh yeah, you know.
Yeah, you do.
You know.
Must know it. It's about fucking.
Yeah. And wanting to fuck you like an animal.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, that song.
That's all. Oh, yeah. The fuck you like an animal song. Sure.
And that's the reason. And that's the reason. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's subversive because, you know, it says, I want to fuck you like an animal, you know, so then it was cool to play. That's why.
And actually, you're going to laugh. To show you how New Jersey my high school was, my graduation year, I didn't go to the prom, but they voted for the prom song, which was not allowed, by the way, was Wasp, Fuck You Like a Beast.
See, there's a band that nobody ever talks about. Nobody ever talked about them when they were around either. I liked Wasp.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I in Texas.
Unfortunately, Blackie Lawless has become a born again, and there's certain songs he won't sing anymore. That one included. Yeah, he's all right wing. You know, all right wing Jesus-y now, just like Dave Mustaine. Yeah,
I get that. What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's
That doesn't even sound like that don't real.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up and sad.
Well, there's Blind in Texas I liked. That was one of my favorites by him. And then they did the Who song. They did a remake of the Who song.
Oh,
Yeah, that one.
The Real Me.
The Real Me. Yes.
Yeah, that album is great too. There's one instrumental called Mephisto Waltz. That's really like it's really a fantastic guitar song.
Wasp.
Yeah, Wasp was really good. And you know, somebody else mentioned Megadeth before. I mean, Megadeth was awesome. And one thing I never understood, there's these people that like they felt like it was kind of like a Beatles versus Stones thing. Like, well, because Dave Mustaine got kicked out of Metallica, so if you were a Megadeth fan, you had to hate Metallica and vice versa. And I'm like, well, it was a good thing they kicked him out because one, he was fucking up, and two, then we ended up getting 2 great bands instead of 1.
Now, I was not a huge fan. I liked Peace Sells, the song. I thought was amazing. I love that song. There were a couple other songs that I liked. But overall, I wasn't a huge fan of Megadeth. There was like this edge that they had that it seemed a little too dark to me at the time. It was a little, and I don't know, I couldn't get into it. But Metallica I loved up until the Black Album. I mean, from Kill 'Em All to the Black Album, I mean, I was there. They lost me. They lost me.
Well, see, I've come to appreciate Load and Reload though, because there's two of their really most angsty songs, Fixer and Outlaw Torn, are on those albums. So it's like, you know, I can kind of still get into that.
Megadeth lost me with a song called Crush 'Em. Go ahead and look up the music video if you want. But to me, that's like jumping the shark. Happy Days.
To me, they lost me with The Threat Is Real. Because basically, Dave Mustaine so writes Peace Sells, Who's Buying, writes Holy Wars, and that whole Rust in Peace album is very anti-war. But then 9/11 happens, and he becomes a right winger, and The Threat Is Real is basically it's Islamo panic is what it is.
Okay.
It's funny because it's not funny. It's funny. The 9/11, I mean, did that just Dave Mustaine and having that step change in his attitude is just symbolic of our culture, of our entire society. He wasn't the only one. He made that shift with millions and millions and millions of other people, who to this day I don't think realize that they have changed. I don't think they know it. I think they think they were always this way.
Well, this is the reason why I feel like Bin Laden won, because he succeeded in killing the America that we knew and turned it into a different one, which may or may not be so hot.
I hear that and I understand that, but I don't think that Bin Laden did that. We did that. One of the main things that we did right after 9/11 was the Patriot Act. And then they've successively renewed it with no thought as if it's some sort of government program, which it really isn't. It's other than to spy on people and whatever. But I mean, the Patriot Act, when it was originally put in through Congress in the fall of 2001, was something like 900 pages. And if you look at it, it's all about correcting old legislation. So you'd have to look up rafts and rafts of other bills to see what, this is changing this line in this document, blah, blah, blah. I mean, so they must have had lawyers working on it for months before 9/11 even happened, right? To have it out that fast.
I don't know about that, but the thing to me though, Paul, is that yes, we pulled the trigger, but basically he was the impetus because I'm not saying 9/11 didn't inspire the changes that happened. Yeah, that's all.
But I mean, but totally true, absolutely true. That's why I said I hear what you're saying. But I mean, like the way America reacted, and it's not just the politicians or the media; it's also some of the people. Like when you watch Fahrenheit 9/11 by Michael Moore, and you talk, people were worried their Walmart was going to get bombed.
Yeah, I mean. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like Dave Mustaine made that change in his head with a whole bunch of other people, millions of other people.
Right.
I mean, like over 200 million people had decided like the next day that, they were different. The world was different, and how they're going to react to the rest of the world was now different. And they might not even realize that they did it, but they did. Because, I mean, the country changed.
Well, I know people, I personally know people who won't fly on national holidays because of that.
Yeah. I mean, like the America that I grew up in, died September 10th.
Right.
That was its last full day.
Yeah.
2001. And this has been a very, very different world since then. And there are a lot of people who are too young to remember what it was before, and they have no idea what we've lost. And it's just like, this country is very different. It's a very different place. It's a much darker place.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I think I mean, obviously, look, the right wing was pushing in this direction to be, already like for 50 years, but that was opened the door, and that's what and basically, I guess it accelerated it. That kind of willingness that people had to go down the fascist route.
I had a smoother dip my toes into this feeling growing up outside of a military installation and watching with my family the invasion of Panama and the beginning of the first Gulf War. And I feel like that community was already where the rest of America is now.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's a holdover from Cold War mentality.
Yeah, we're very militarized as a whole country now.
But I mean, you think about it though, we've been militarized since World War II. There was we started to draw down after World War II, and then Korea happened, and we've been on a war footing since Korea.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to contemplate. I mean, I know I've been alive since John Kennedy was president, and in my lifetime, the only president not to bomb another country during his reign was Jimmy Carter, right? So America has been on a war footing, as you say, pretty much my whole life, and pretty much for its whole history. I think if you add up the 40 years or whatever that America's existed, we've probably been at war for like at least 200 of them.
I think there's 16 years where a total of 16 years where we weren't at war with somebody.
Wow. Okay, that's even worse than I thought.
It's. I mean, you think about it. We were born in blood, so and we were built in blood, because you think about we between slaves and indentured servants and women having no rights, and any indigenous people being wiped out.
I've said it many times myself, Joe, that we are a nation born of war, and that's been our thing since the beginning. But I don't know if that really is a good excuse anymore, though. I mean, what country wasn't born out of war?
Well, I don't think it's an excuse. I don't think it's an excuse. It just kind of describes it. It's kind of more just.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mean. But I understand. I'm just saying though that most countries are born out of war. That was the whole point of the wars that bore them. Was to exist.
Well, Deep Ashtray, I actually said that, but then I said we did draw down after World War II, and then came back up during Korea. That was the one time we drew down. Was after World War II. We did draw down for like 2-3 years, and then we drew back up and have been there ever since. Yeah, I mean it's. See, the problem is and this is what's pissing me off. I'm not subscribed to his channel anymore, but I caught when you watch something many times, it's still, when you unsubscribed, it still suggests things to you. So I watched fucking Bill Maher's New Rules last night, and yet again, what did I say last time? It's, well, things are bad, but let's punch the left in the gut and put the blame at their feet. Not the people that are running around with guns. Not the people who there was a guy, Charlie Kirk had a rally last week, and there was a guy who literally said, "When do we get to use the guns on people? Not when will we have to use these guns."
Right.
When do we get to? This is someone who wants to do it. When will it be justifiable? Really, I want to do horrible things to Democrats. When will I be justified in doing so? And he even made it clear. No, I'm not joking. And so this is, but defending trans rights and saying saying maybe we shouldn't be out and out racist in public, and basically telling comedians when you shit on people, it's not so hot. But that's the problem. I mean, I really fucking hate him, and he's been going this right wing path, and I started seeing other people saying that in the comments too. It's like, yeah, he's been going down this road. I don't know why, but it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you can point to excesses on the left, but we're not killing people in the fucking streets.
Did you all see the other day on Congress, Ted Cruz questioning Merrick Garland and basically defending a parent at a school board meeting for using a Nazi salute at the school board meeting? I'm like,
I heard about it. I didn't see it.
Don't get me wrong. Fundamentally, the point Ted Cruz is making is correct. You have the right to do a Nazi salute as some sort of protest at a school board meeting. You have the right to do it. That's not germane to the point, though, is it? Not at all. Having the right to do it. You know, I don't know. I get so angry when people say, well, you have the right to do it. That doesn't mean doing it is right.
So Kyle Rittenhouse.
Right.
Hi, Kyle Rittenhouse. The judge in his case has said that the prosecution cannot refer to the victims as victims. They can only refer to them as rioters, looters, and there was another term, I don't remember what it was. But it already assumes that these people had committed crimes.
Right.
Arsonist was the other one. Arsonist. So it already assumes that these people had already, these three people that Rittenhouse shot were guilty of crimes and therefore could not be a victim of crime.
Which is a leap of logic I don't understand on its face.
Yeah, I mean, the trial is completely over now at that point. I mean,
Raven, I looked into this a little bit deeper, and they're not allowed to call them rioters or arsonists in the middle of the trial. But if in the process of the trial there's evidence of that, in their final statements they're allowed to call them that, even though
but that doesn't make any sense because it's the prosecution prosecuting Kyle Rittenhouse. Why would they then choose to call the victims arsonists?
Well, right. Plus the fact that, you know, I mean, the prosecution is making the case that they are victims. They should be able to call them that. They normally are. But yeah, the judge is already putting their thumb on the scale.
Yeah, it's already. It's the whole point of the trial is that two of these people are dead, victims of gunshots from Kyle Rittenhouse, who was the person who was on trial. If you're not allowed to refer to them as victims, well then that's it. Then
murder.
There's no crime.
Well, it's certainly not murder, right?
Right.
So there you go. I mean, so this whole thing is already done. In the judge's mind, this is already done. That doesn't make any sense to me because it doesn't matter if you call them victims or 4-week-old puppies. They still are dead by gunshot wounds from this kid who was where he should not have been, outside of his home state with a loaded weapon.
Right. He was there illegally. Because the state he was in, he didn't have the right to be brandishing a weapon in the way that he was.
So, I mean, this just reeks of mistrial.
I don't understand how it can't be a mistrial because the judge basically is given instructions, as you quite rightly point out, Raven, which neuters the concept of justice. I mean, like if you can't call someone who was shot to death a victim, well, then, as you say, it's not murder. Then it's just
and the funny thing is just for sake of argument, they were doing bad things. That doesn't mean that they can't be victims of a crime.
And they're not the ones on trial.
Right. Well, he made them basically be the ones on trial.
Exactly. And there you go. And there's why it's a mistrial, because now their behavior is being scrutinized, and it shouldn't be. Unless they were going after that kid with armed with weapons to kill him. But that wasn't what happened. We saw the video. Hey, welcome back.
So, Michael, a few months ago, after Kyle Rittenhouse was originally arrested, you mentioned that there was video footage of him. Was he conferring with cops, or was he was talking about? I can't actually remember the details of it, but he was basically sort of laying the groundwork for, hey, I might have to shoot someone. You know what I mean? Or is that an overstatement on my part?
That's basically true.
But the fact that the cops were basically telling them, like, good job, you know, and being buddy with them just minutes before all that happened.
Right.
You know, I feel like they should have had a better mindset about vigilantism and just that militia mindset that's up there.
Sure.
You know,
Some
it's
of those who work forces.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the problem. Because basically the cops are perfectly fine with violence when it comes from their right wing, you know, their white Sioux buddies.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This is another thing. Joe, you mentioned that person from the audience that questioned Charlie Kirk and said, when do we get to use the guns? And I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but I would say there's at least tens of thousands of people that are got a fucking hard on to use their guns on people. And what really gets me is like, I don't understand why anybody wants to live in that world. I mean, I honestly don't know. What are you going to do? Go around in your neighborhood and shoot people with a Biden bumper sticker, or shoot people who you know to be liberals? I mean, where's the freaking line? And
that's what they would do. That's what they would do. I mean, the vice chair of the Sussex County Republican Party routinely says things like eradicate liberals. He uses language that is very much, you know, why am I having a hard time finding words? Just about, like, you know, genocide type words.
Well,
I mean, very,
yeah, eradicate is pretty extreme.
Yeah.
I think that the tendency to overstate things in that sort of way, to use words that are deliberately inflammatory, I'm not exactly sure when it sort of got as much traction as it has now, but now it has so much traction. It's almost like people have to outdo one another with their inflammatory language. In fact, I think that's how the problem got so bad in the first place. You know,
well, that's why we're an extreme society. I mean, if you think about it, like, we use superlatives to like ridiculous levels. So that's why now things started getting called like something that was awesome. Awesome is like too small now. So now it's extreme, whatever, because, you know, just like straight up, you know, being awesome or fucking great is not enough.
no, now it's amazeballs.
Well, I think one person had an idea of why we're so pushed to the extremes, and he's trying to rebrand his whole company this week, just because he realizes that he's kind of to blame for a lot of the extreme nature of where people have gone.
let's just say, for the sake of rhetorical discussion, that Zuckerberg is personally responsible.
Okay.
What should happen about that?
Shoot him.
Well, I think that there needs to be more done about how that algorithm pushes people to the extreme, and it's not just his company. It's
well, I mean, if any social media service or wow, I'm hearing some weird echo here. If any social media service or even YouTube or anywhere has things set up to try to find things that are similar to what it looks like your interests are, keywords or whatever, it's eventually going to lead you to those kinds of places. The only way that it won't is if they purposely go out of their way to make the systems bring you to something else. But something to think about, though, with that is, do we want everything that we search for and look for to be completely curated? Or do we want something to where there's at least some bit of us being able to actually find what we're looking for?
Paul, if you're going to talk to us, you need to come correct and unmute, please.
Thank you. Oopsie. Right. So, I mean, in the days before Google was a search engine, and even in the early days of Google, for that matter, if I typed in a subject heading like dolphins plus spaceships plus pyramids search, a certain list of things would come up. And if Raven on the other side of America typed in dolphins plus aliens plus pyramids search, Raven would have got the same results that I got. That no longer pertains because of the way the Google algorithms work. So if we search the same thing, based on what it will show us is based on our search history to begin with. It's not just going to show us the most popular sites based on the words we put in. It's going to show us what it thinks we want to see. So, like, for example, if I put in Egypt, but I watch a lot of Middle Eastern news, I might get more news stuff. Where if y'all put in Egypt, you might get like holiday stuff. Or if you search history stuff, you might get pyramid stuff or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it seems like that wouldn't work. It seems like that wouldn't work, but it does, and that's part of the problem is how accurate it is.
Well, see, part of the problem though is that, I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's literally trillions of web pages now, and even with curation, a lot of times you end up getting garbage when you search for something. You get a lot of things that are not relevant, and that's with curation. So I can't even imagine what it would be like if there wasn't some sort of curation. I think the biggest problem is really, it's not so much, I think what Paul said, that in itself wouldn't be a problem, but it's when it's the political stuff. So if I say, January 6th, well, if the thing identifies me as a right winger, it's going to point me to all things that say that it was totally justified and all that, and Biden stole the election.
They'll point him to defense attorneys.
And so I think if it didn't do curation on the political side, that would have been healthier, because then at least people would be seeing, more than just, their something that basically just justifies whatever they already think.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it puts people into echo chambers for sure, and puts them in a bubble when they do this.
Here's one thing though, I've thought about this a lot. We've always been in bubbles, make no mistake, because if you think back in the day, most of us, we're old enough to remember when the common parlance was, don't talk about, religion or politics or,
in
things
polite
like that.
company.
In polite company. So you generally only really talked about those things and people that basically agreed with you, or if there were differences, they weren't radical differences. But that's totally changed now. And so actually, I think part of our conflict is that we're in these bubbles that we create, but then we're forced to the bubbles to crash into one another. So I was talking to a friend about this last night, like the number of people who, like, I play strategy games, and strategy games tend to bring in like a active or active military crowd, post-military crowd. It tends to be a more conservative crowd. But for the most part, we got along. We just avoided those hot button issues. But then when I, on Facebook, and I see these guys who are posting this, right-wing bullshit that I know is false, and I know is inflammatory and really obnoxious, and then like it makes me see more of who they are. They're not just someone that has a different view. They believe things that I think are fundamentally immoral, or just like they violate my own ethics. And so I'm like, well, this is a fundamental difference of values. So if someone's out there and posting anti-trans, anti-gay, misogynistic, whatever, or racist stuff, that's the other thing too. Is like, I'm like, motherfucker, I can see you. We're supposed to be friends, and you're posting this shit. So there's so many people that I used to be friends with on Facebook that I'm not anymore. And I don't even talk to some of them. I don't even talk to anymore, even when outside of Facebook, because I'm like, wow, this person believes some really reprehensible shit. But back in the day when we weren't forced to confront that with one another, we just go on our merry way and have a good time and hang out together. And I can't hang out with them anymore.
Yeah.
Paul.
In the days before social media, and for that matter, before the internet, I mean, generally speaking, people didn't open their entire head to their friends. I mean, you talk about stuff, you talk about sports, or you talk about movies, you talk about your marriage, or whatever the fuck, right? But I mean, you didn't necessarily, it's not just because you didn't talk about it in polite conversation. Most people really didn't give enough of a fuck about politics to really like stake their flag on a hill about it. You know what I mean? Like they do now. And it's, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing that people are more open about their beliefs, but it's also, it just makes it harder. I mean, you say about people on Facebook. I mean, I've got one of my best friends in California, as a result of Donald Trump's presidency, she lost like 40 members of her friends, like people we've known for, both of us have known for like 30 years, 40 years. But they just like went too far down the Trump trail. And honestly, she just like didn't want to associate with him anymore for that reason. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's really hard. You know, how do you look at someone who you had respect for when they have, you know, when you can't respect them anymore? You know, it's a tricky one.
I don't know, Proctor Hawk. I don't know. I don't know if it was better. I really don't. I want to be friends with people who are like-minded, and if I find out that they're not, and then they can go their merry way. I don't want to be friends with people who believe in things that would bring harm to me. And I had lost a lot of friends in 2016 when a lot of people, you know, showed who they really were. Friends that I had from childhood. You know, so I think it's good, you know, that they were able to pontificate on social media.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you know, and the thing is, I've had people say to me, you know, they ask, oh, well, you'll end a friendship over a simple difference of opinion. I'm like, no, not a simple difference of opinion. A difference of opinion is what should taxes be, or what's the limit of what government should be? Where should we and should we not make accommodations for religion and all this? That, you know, that's kind of fraught. But it's when it's like, well, who gets to have rights and who doesn't? And am I going to accept somebody's humanity? That's a fundamental system of values to me. And it's like, you know, and I've even said, look, like, okay, what you always say with trans rights, you don't have to understand it. You don't even have to agree. Just treat people with fucking respect, and I'd be good enough for me. But if someone's going to go out there and put out a lot of trans hate or, you know, gay hate or whatever, I got no truck with them.
So okay, quick change of subject, kind of, sort of. Something that has come up in the chat before. We talked about like my coming out and how certain people in my life didn't take it very well, and that the general feeling was they might come along over time. My mom called me tonight, as I was on the phone with earlier. She's at bingo. She's one of those old bingo ladies. She's at bingo, and she was talking to a guy there who, you know, she was talking, I don't know what brought it up, but he was saying that he was gay. And she said, well, my son came out as gay. And then he said he was transgender. And she showed him my picture, a recent picture. And the guy's like, oh, wow, she's beautiful. And she said, and well, here he was as a man. And then showed him an older picture, and he goes, I know him. So it's like somebody I've known for probably about 13, 14 years. Something like that. But, you know, I mean, he had no idea, you know, that I had transitioned. And he said to her, he's been talking about transitioning for a long time. But what I felt about this, like my mom, she, you know, used my dead name. She used he as pronouns and all that stuff. But the picture that she showed, the first picture that she showed, was a current picture. And I was like, hey, that's actually progress. You know, she's like, here's my son. Here's my son. You know, with the long hair and the boobs. There's my son. You know, and I was like, wow, okay.
Well, yeah, it's a step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah.
I was I was acquainted with someone who transitioned as a trans man, and it was a few years, and I could no longer remember their dead name. And that's when my mind says the transition is complete, because if I can't even remember who, then you've transitioned in my mind, at least. In this person's mind, I can't even remember, before. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a milestone for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, nobody here on the panel has slipped in a while. So,
Well, Raven,
I'm the worst for it, for sure, but yeah.
Raven didn't do me any favors with this one because my friend Nikki used to be Nick. And so you could catch yourself by just adding the Y to the end of it. You could just say Nikki. And yeah, Raven did not do us any favors with this one.
I thought about Roberta. It's an ugly name. I
Robbie?
feeling
Robbie would have been called an I on the end.
Okay, so on my head for a brief time, I had considered Bobby.
Well, it's too late now. You're Raven.
But yeah, it's too late now. I'm Raven, and I decided against Bobby anyway. But I mean, there was. I believe me, I looked at all of the Robert variations and decided against all of them. But my favorite would have been Bobby. So if I was going to do it, it would have been Bobby.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm all discombobulated, actually, whatever you want, it doesn't have to even be related. Like you just go for anything, because I'm already, my brain's broke. So
see for me, like I reached the point where I don't even, like, for a while there I had to like consciously think about it. I reached the point where I don't anymore. Like Raven just comes out of my head, so it's not like I have to think about what I'm going to say. I just say it, and it turns out to be right.
Fake it till you make it. So this is what broke your brain, Michael. You mention it every show.
Boobicles.
Or at least I'm staring. You can't tell.
But I can.
Boobicles.
Chesticles.
Breastages. That's from breastises. Do you remember on In Living Color? It was the Anton Bates. He's the one that screwed up the word, all the language. He was using words in the wrong way because he was trying to sound intelligent, and he was like screwing it all up. And there was always when there was one where he was in jail, and his fellow inmate was like, he's talking about some woman. He's like, oh, she got big breastises. Breastises. Chesticles. Londo Malari. Yeah.
No, Dev Shell is still Dev Shell. I'll always be Dev Shell.
Well, see, that's something else too. If somebody has trouble remembering Raven, they can always just call you Dev Shell. That part didn't change. Paul escaped. I'm in charge now.
What are you going to do with this power?
Oh, you don't even want to know.
Okay.
You don't. I don't even know.
He's going to make everybody's video smaller.
I don't even want to know.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's video smaller.
So the story behind Dev Shell is actually the same exact story behind Raven. It's the same name, just inverted. Dev Shell, my two oldest kids, that's part of their first names each. Raven is the other half of their first names. So
you should change your last name to Dev Shell when you Raven Dev Shell.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. So it's Shell and Devin, and that gave me Raven, and it gave me Dev Shell. So
that's cool.
So and my new middle name, on the 15th of November anyway, will be July. Julai, July. and that is Julian and Kai put together. And that's the two younger kids' middle names. So
Cool. So, Kizum's being very quiet now. I wonder if Kizumi stepped away. Kizumi, you're muted if you.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, you're awfully quiet there.
Hey, I have a suggestion, and I don't know how well this suggestion will go down. Michael, I would have to count you out of this, although your participation would still be welcome.
Okay.
But what do y'all say to maybe not necessarily next week, but we should arrange in advance and all of us should get completely fucking drunk on the stream at the same time?
I haven't been drunk in a while. Long while.
I haven't been drunk in years and years.
it wouldn't take
What's that?
it wouldn't take much. I'm not much of a drinker.
What about you, kids?
I mean, we could do that, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, certain of us have been drunk on many a stream, but I won't mention names. But not me, that's for sure. I get stoned, but I don't get drunk. I haven't been like actually like really drunk since 2013. So it's been a long time.
Yes, Deep Ashtray. Mike will be the designated driver.
Yeah. Thank you for voluntolding me.
We don't want you to get in trouble or anything.
Yeah, Michael, you'd have to be the referee, I suppose, on that one in case we all got like a little too rowdy or whatever.
Yeah.
Would you be up for that?
I don't like talking to drunk people.
Fair enough.
And, it's just a life choice.
Huh?
It's a good thing I'm not a gynecologist.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I don't actually particularly care to be around drunk people if I'm not drunk myself. That's for sure.
We mentioned being a gynecologist. I remember I forget where I saw this with somebody. The joke was like, a guy was thinking, oh wow, it'd be kind of cool to be a gynecologist. You're looking at girl bits all day, and then until their friend said, Aunt B goes to the gynecologist.
Oh no.
All of a sudden, it doesn't seem so hot.
Well, yeah, I would never want to have that job simply because you want to keep it special. You don't, if you see thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, after a while, it's like pancakes to a breakfast chef. You know what I mean? It's like that.
I don't know, man. I used to go to go-go bars all the time, the nudie bars, and I never got bored of it. I guess eventually I did, but that's just because I'm old and decrepit now.
I don't know. I've pierced more than my fair share, and I didn't get bored of it. But give me another 10 years of piercing, and maybe I would have got bored of it. Don't know.
Hey, I know I haven't said much, but I'm getting really tired, and that's why it's probably I'm gonna head for bed here. So,
all right, kids, thanks for hanging out, man.
It's only 7 o'clock where you are. What the hell?
Kids has a very strange sleeping schedule. Kids only sleeps he doesn't sleep at the same time of the day every day.
It's sort of instead of living a 24-hour day, it's a 25-hour day. So my sleep gets pushed forward about an hour every day. So.
Oh wow, that's bizarre.
The non-24, it's a real thing.
I just heard The Price is Right.
Yeah, me too.
Someone just decided to call me right at that time. I have The Price is Right music as my ringtone, so
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I just I don't have a 25-hour schedule. I just if I was left to my own devices, I'm a night owl. I would be getting up at noon and being up till 4 a.m.
I have to ask, this is total trivia, and I'm sorry to change the subject, Joe, but Kiz, the Price is Right on your ringtone?
Huh? Yeah.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. Before you go, I've got to ask you, what the fuck? What made you decide to go for the Price is Right?
Because it's if you actually, I got a copy of the entire song that you can normally not actually hear on the show, but it's a good copy of the whole song, and it's actually kind of a neat song. But it's something that, well, on Android you can make your own ringtone. That's not something that you could find anywhere else. So if I hear that, I know for sure it's my phone. It's not going to be someone else's phone.
That's pretty cool. I'm always fascinated by how people choose their ringtones. I mean, I just choose a ringtone that doesn't sound like anybody else I'm in the room with, and that's it for me. I hate most of the ringtones that come as sort of options on the phone. They're almost all diabolical.
Yeah, so I like making my I had one for a while where it was just my voice going ring ring, the phone is ringing, hey the phone's ringing, and it was kind of dumb, but I like this a lot better. It stands out more. So
and if people recognize it, you made a new friend.
Well, I mean, you can put different ringtones for every single person on your contacts list, right? I mean, but I can't be bothered. Do you have to be a millennial to care that much about your phone? I mean, I'm not sure.
I think so. Well, I always laugh with millennials when they get into the thing of like, oh, well, you guys probably can't, set your VCR. I'm like, motherfucker, I do stuff with technology you couldn't even think of in your entire life.
I was like, I invented the VCR, mofo.
That's right.
Well, anyway, y'all have a good night.
Take care.
Peace out. There we are. Well, and then there were 4.
And there were 4.
Yeah, but I back in the day, even before smartphones, people were in the UK anyway. You go to these download ringtone sites and pay like $2.50 or whatever for a stupid ringtone for your phone. I mean, I remember when my friend said she showed me this ringtone, and I'm like, "Where'd you get that?" And she told me to be $2.50 for it. I'm like, "Why would you do that?" Do you know what I mean? I just can't. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm too old, I guess.
Yeah, I'm always.
It was a real racket back in the day. Ringtones were a lot of money.
Sure.
See, people have this like kind of fool notion that they're like, unique or something. So like that showed like having something different that proves how unique they are. And of course, if you're doing what everybody else is doing, then it doesn't prove that at all. It's kind of like bikers. A lot of people think of bikers as like rebels and all that, but they're conformists. They just have their conformity is different than the mainstream. But it's just if you were gonna try to go to a biker bar dressed like just like a square, you would not be well received.
Sure. I mean, there's I guess it's a subculture, isn't it? And it's just like goths is another one. I know plenty of goths who they are very individualistic for sure, but at the same time, they're wearing a freaking uniform. You know what I mean? I mean, effectively a uniform, even though it definitely has its distinct individual character, and you cannot take that away from them.
Right.
It's amazing how many different things you can do with black.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to show that you're part of that group. You're part of that tribe. Even though you're still an individual, you're part of that group.
Yeah.
Especially if it's going to be easy for somebody to not realize or to overlook it.
Well, that's why, to me, like one of my favorite things that was ever on South Park was when they did the dance competition. And they got the goth kid. So like all the goth kids were like, well, I'm so individualistic that I won't do it and blah blah blah. And then then the final kid was like, well, I'm so nonconformist that I'm not going to conform with you, so I'll do it. And they're like, oh, I think we just got punked.
I mean, it's like early on with the show when I had when I came out. I was doing the shirt this low all the time, just so as a reminder of I am part of this group, and because of my voice or the way I looked and the way I was presenting myself in other ways, that it might be easy to overlook that or to forget it, but you couldn't miss the boobs. So that was why I like the really tight shirts and the push-up bra at the time. I don't think I need that anymore. But now I do it because Michael has mentioned it several times that he can't help but stare. So now it's just like, okay, fine. Like last week, I didn't do it, and it was just like whatever. So, but
the week that I'm not here, you put them away.
I did. I was not doing this last week. No.
Okay.
So I tell you all the time, this is for you, because you keep mentioning about staring. So, but anyway, yeah, that was the whole point, or it kind of still is, but I don't need it anymore. But that was kind of the point. I am part of this group.
This is the 21st century. Women aren't pieces of meat for men to stare at.
Oh, but they do anyway.
So I'm just saying, like, you deserve respect.
Oh, yes, and I will demand it. That still doesn't mean that people aren't going to look. I mean, I stare. I stare at men. I stare at women. This is a reality. I'm an animal before I'm anything else.
I don't think there's anything wrong with objectifying someone in your own mind. It's whether you present at them and whether they're uncomfortable with it. That may or may not be good or bad, right? But I mean, like in your own head, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at whoever you want to look at and going, whatever. It's as long as you're not acting on it and putting people in an uncomfortable position and or worse,
Human reproduction is at least to an extent based on objectification. So. You're not going to want to get, bump uglies for somebody that you don't think is attractive.
Well, depends on how horny you are.
This is true also, but in general.
Yeah, generally speaking, but yeah, sometimes you're just like, you just want to, you just want to get off and you're like, hey, they're willing and you're there. So it's like, yeah, what the hell?
Okay.
Yeah, my memory stretches back that far, but it's been a long time.
I mean, being willing when you really need it makes somebody much more attractive.
I'm avoiding talking about Steve Harvey because I can't stand him. I think he's a piece of shit, but whatever.
I don't even know who Steve Harvey is.
Oh, he's Mr. Potato Head. It's actually kind of true. Look it up.
I will look it up after the show, but I can't be bothered looking it up while we're on. But yeah, no, I don't even know who that is. I was obviously someone who became famous while I was away. So, which is in fact applies to most famous people. If someone became famous in the 90s or the early noughties, I probably don't know who they are.
Yeah,
I was raising my kids then.
He's a comedian. I don't think he's very funny. But I mean, he's not like a Dave Chappelle type comedian, I mean, it's a completely different. I think he's more closer to the Bill Cosby type comedian.
Yeah.
But he's also the host of Family Feud, or the most recent. I don't know if it's still on or not. He's the most recent host of Family Feud.
Okay. I never saw Richard Dawson as a host of Family Feud. That's the only one I've ever seen.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, a long time ago.
But I mean, Steve Harvey's just said a lot of anti-LGBT things.
Right.
In his comedy, like I said, his comedy isn't that kind of comedy. He doesn't bash people in his comedy, but he has said it in like interviews and all kinds of stuff. Just kind of running his mouth.
He's also anti-atheist too.
Yeah. So fuck Steve Harvey. So.
Richard Dawson wasn't just too kissy. He was too handsy by miles and miles and miles. And you ever watch any of those old ones? I mean, literally every single woman, he'd have his hand in the smaller of their back or maybe even a little bit lower sometimes. And you're just like, dude, you're on television. Get a grip. You kind of had the feeling he was cut all the time as well.
Yeah,
like,
he had a grip right there.
Bad choice of words.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, he's kind of, if you think about what Trump said in that one interview, thing with the, the whole thing about, well, they let you do it. I mean, that's, there's a lot of, there's a certain amount of truth to that, and that's not good. But that was that mentality, because a lot of women are like, oh, edified, oh, he's famous and blah blah blah.
Well, I'm not a woman in the 70s, so I don't really know. But I mean, culture changes, right? If it's generally accepted as okay for men to be touchy-feely with women and women to be touchy-feely with men, and that's the culturally accepted norm, I can't see why it's wrong. If everybody accepts that that's normal, it's when people don't accept that it's normal that it becomes wrong. And I think for a long time, women were sort of put in a position where it was normal and they were okay enough with it, in the sense that they didn't realize they had a choice. And then women realized they did have a choice, and they could speak up and say, hey, no, this is actually not okay. And
Right. I don't know at the time how it was viewed at the time.
Yeah, me neither.
I have no idea. And yeah, like you're saying, I mean, if it was considered to be okay at the time, it doesn't make any sense to today look back and be like, hey, look what this motherfucker was doing. Because at the time, it wasn't wrong.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. This is one of those things where a lot of times people who didn't have any power might not have thought it was okay, but they didn't have the power to speak up. So that's the thing. I mean, so I'm very circumspect about the idea. Oh well, that was the past, and that's how it was. That's how it was because the people in power made it that way. And
right. The extreme example of that would be slavery, right? I mean, the extreme example of that mentality. That was just kind of wrong.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because people at the time knew it was wrong. Slavery, people at the time, they knew it was wrong. Right. I mean, they said so. I mean, like our founding fathers, they even said so. This is a problem. We need to fix it, but we won't.
Yeah, they kicked it down the field, didn't they, to the next generation?
They just kept kicking it down the road. But I mean, that's the immediate thing that people think of. That seems like that's the logical conclusion. But the difference is that people did know that slavery was wrong.
I guess my argument is that at least some people did know it was wrong to be handsy too, because even if it wasn't widespread, but there's certain media from back then, movies, TV shows, where it's alluded to, like, oh, well, watch out for that guy because he's this, that, the other thing. So clearly there was at least some people that recognized that it wasn't so hot, but women just were, there was a certain expectation. Just like if you think about it, I mean, marital rape, I mean, we recognize it now, but basically women just didn't have the right to say no. I mean, that was never right. And there were
until the early 90s.
Right. And so I'm sure there were tons of women who were forced to have sex with their husbands who totally didn't think it was okay, but didn't think that they had that. Well, it was new under law. They didn't have any recourse.
Yeah. Some of us wouldn't be here if it weren't that way back then.
Well, myself included.
Some of us weren't wanted.
Okay, so Proctor Huck and Marcus, I will say this about Steve Harvey. He did make the Family Feud better. Like I said, I never thought he was terribly funny. I'm not a real big fan because of his views, but he did make the Family Feud more fun. Absolutely, he did. I don't know about funny, but fun.
Compared to like Louis Anderson.
Yeah. Who was somebody else I was never a huge fan of? I don't know. He's just too hard on himself. He joked about himself to the point where I felt bad. Actually, it's just like, dude, stop.
I just want to continue real quick with the train of thought we were just on a second ago, if you don't mind, because like I've been watching an awful lot of old entertainment lately, just because it's more interesting than some of the more new offerings as far as I'm concerned. And me and my gal, about a week and a half ago, we watched this old Frank Sinatra movie called Pal Joey, which has got quite a few famous songs in it. And it's also got Sid Charisse and I can't remember who else is it, but the misogyny in that movie by modern standards is shocking, right? I mean, like, but it's in the movie, it's portrayed as like perfectly normal, and it probably was back in the 50s. I can't say I wasn't alive yet, but I've also been watching a lot of Perry Mason, which again is like late 50s. And And Della Street is his secretary, and she's a well-respected professional legal secretary. I mean, it's quite clear that she's got lots of respect, and she, but still they sort of like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's just being a woman and blah, blah, blah. It just blows my mind, and she sort of laughs it off in the TV show. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to overlook that and so on. So I'm not sure, even if it was accepted as normal, that it was actually accepted by the women or not. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The fact that she's like, well, I guess I'll have to accept that. That was actually the show being a little brave in kind of putting that out there. That basically she's making it clear she doesn't like that.
Right.
So I don't really have a choice but to accept it. Like historical context only goes so far.
Right.
And I think a lot of times historical context is used to excuse a lot of bad shit that happened in the past. People are just horrible. And the thing is, this is what makes what's going on here in the US right now with this rise of fascism so scary, is that the world in general has been trending in a better direction. We talk about atrocities. Shit, it used to be every Tuesday. Oh, they're just killing the villagers today. Oh, of course it's Tuesday. That's when they do that. And now, I mean, yeah, atrocities still happen, but we kind of all pretty much recognize them as what they are, and they don't happen as often. So when you see, it's weird because we're seeing this rise of fascism, not just here but around the world, but especially here, at a time when overall it's a time of relative prosperity, and that's unusual.
Go on, Raven.
Joe just talked about like deep, heavy stuff, and I don't feel right just addressing. So I read that Green Machine in his voice, and I just that was funny.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, I could see Louis having problems putting him back on. And I know what you're talking about, Raven, as far as Louis kind of being too self-deprecating, because at a certain point, it's not just a joke. This is like actually a cry for help. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to say, Joe, that you're a big guy, nobody would be surprised, yourself either. And I've known you now for almost a decade, right? Yeah. And you've always known it, and you crack jokes on yourself from time to time,
right?
And they're funny, and I can laugh because I'm laughing with you.
Right.
Louis Anderson's comedy about himself is just, it's relentless, and it doesn't feel funny anymore, and it does feel like a cry for help. And it's just like, I am watching on TV. I cannot help you. I don't know what to do now. I have to turn this off.
Yeah.
So it goes from somebody who Louis Anderson is brilliant. He just is. But I can only take so much because it does get really heavy.
Yeah. The only things of his I've watched in a long time is there was this show on Comedy Central for a while called This Is Not Happening. And it was like funny stories, and some of them were more wild and wacky than funny, but crazy shit that happened to various, mostly comedians, but some, non-comedian celebrities. And Louis Anderson does two segments on that show, and they're great. And the great part is he's not dishing on himself. He dishes on his family, but he's not dishing so much on himself. And they're hysterical. And again, these are real stories. Even piece of shit Joe Rogan did like 2 good segments on that show. As much as I can't stand his piece of shit ass. But my favorite one, though, and I think you may have seen it, I posted on Facebook a couple times, is Sophia Alexander. She and her family are from Russia, and she had this story about how her grandfather was, this like sailor. He sailed around the world, worldly guy, but then in his old age, he was never circumcised, and the flap of skin at the end of his penis grew together, and his dick got septic, and so they had to cut open the flap and squeeze out all this stuff. And her mother and aunt bailed on her as translators for her grandfather. So she had to during this procedure, she had to translate to her grandfather. And the whole thing of telling him grandpa, they're gonna have to slice your dick open and blah blah blah. And then she's screaming it in Russian when she's talking to the grandfather, and it's fucking hysterical. Dayushka. So maybe I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, it's more frightening than it does anything else.
Oh yeah, well, especially the one where she's tells her grandfather, he's like, oh, because at first he's not really hearing because he's septic, so he's not really with it. And then as she's
the shouting in Russian, that's just funny. It just reminds me of the thing about life is short, so tell people that you love them. But life is also terrifying, so yell at them in German.
Yeah. Yeah. The keyboard player for Rammstein said that if French is the language of love, German is the language of anger.
I used to think that the German language just sounds like it takes an awful lot of energy to speak, but I know that's not true. It doesn't take any more energy than my language does to them, but it just sounds like it does. You know what I mean?
Well, especially, I mean, I know some German, and I've taught a bit of to myself, and it is.
Thank you, Rammstein.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what motivated me for sure. But there's certain things, at least as a non-native speaker, and going from English to German, I think it would be much easier to go the other way around. In fact, my friend Hendrik, he's a native German. He loves English, and he actually prefers to speak in English because he's like, German is too much of a mess and it's too complicated. English is easy. So it's funny when you got a native speaker who's like, yeah, fuck that language. But yeah, German is kind of, and especially there's sounds that they produce that we don't really exactly have. Like the letter V is pronounced like a V and an F together. So you have to aspirate, but you also have to uvulate, so you have to do those both. And I've done it a few times in my life, but it's very difficult. But to a native speaker, it's no big deal. They just,
It's a very harsh language.
Yeah. Especially when men say it. I've heard women speaking in German, and sometimes it could almost sound lyrical. But every guy I've heard speak German, at best it sounds neutral, but usually it sounds like rah.
And then you go to the Netherlands, right? And it sounds like people are speaking German, but they're all on mushrooms or something. It's like,
and they're gonna hock up a loogie,
right?
Because it's a lot more, which is funny that the Belgian version of Dutch is called Flemish. You could understand it when you hear them speak it. It's like, I'll stand back. I'm going to wear a face shield while you talk because I don't want to get it on me. What's really funny though, like I don't know if I said this before in this stream. I said it in the A stream. I just don't know if it was this one. But when Suzanne and I were in the Netherlands, like she was doing some work, and I was traveling with her. So we were in Germany, and then we went to the Netherlands, and we came back to Germany. And I found the Dutch people, or at least in Arnhem, were very unpleasant. They were very non-welcoming, and I'm sitting there, I got my Dutch phrase book. I'm not expecting people to cater to me, and they were just really unwelcoming. And so we're driving back, and I say to Suzanne, I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I can't wait to get back to the warmth of the German people.
That's pretty funny. Well, I was in Amsterdam twice. The first time I went in, I guess, must have been 2005. And the second time I went with my friend Jen in 2011. And when I went in 2005, I tried to be my amiable self and talk to Dutch people, but I didn't seem to be getting very much. When I went with Jen, and mind you, Jen's like tiny and has long ass dreadlocks, right? everybody in the world wanted to talk to us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, like it's just interesting to me when you've got a pretty woman with you, you know, how things are different. You know,
The world revolves around pretty women.
yeah.
Well, that's why there was that whole thing of with that woman that went missing and her boyfriend. Now that they found both of their bodies, but it was like, it's like, okay, people go missing every day. I don't know how many people go missing every day in the United States alone. But if it's a pretty white girl, it's international fucking news. Like, do you remember that one that went missing in the it was somewhere in the Caribbean? I think it was,
That was Natalie Holloway.
Yeah, Natalie Holloway.
The latest one was Gabby Petito.
Yeah, but Holloway is like, oh, pretty blonde white woman. Everybody on the planet needs to know this.
Well, in Britain, it must be 15, 20 years ago now, this young kid called Madeleine McCain got snatched from a hotel room when her parents left her and other toddlers in the room as well, and went and had some social gathering, I guess, at another hotel room or possibly the restaurant of the hotel. They came back and the daughter was gone. And it became like a media sensation that lasted well over a year in the UK. And I personally think there's strong evidence to say that they murdered their own kid. And the idea that these people got rich off of this disgusts me. And I mean, also ended up breaking up their marriage, which is not surprising because it's often the case that if you have a child that dies, it breaks up the couple. Whether that child dies accidentally or through murder or any other, you know, whatever way, it's very hard on a couple when they lose a child. But I don't know, man. The Madeleine McCain thing, it got all this press coverage, and yet the story was they negligently left their preschool children in a hotel room with no adult supervision, and somehow they're not monsters.
Yeah.
What? No, because they're both like, you know, young urban professionals with good jobs. And, you know, it just made me so angry. You know, it is one of the many emblematic things that you could see that the justice system doesn't work equally for everybody.
Right. Because if they were a poor couple, they would have been in jail. Yeah.
Or people of color or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, the bottom line is they were like telegenic media type people, and they saw the opportunity to use the media to their advantage, whether that's cynical or not. You know, whether they did it or not, it's still cynical is what I mean. Whether they're guilty or not, it's still cynical either way. You know what I mean? I mean, think, hey, you know, we could make some money. We might as well. We've lost our daughter. I suppose that's the best possible way you can look at it, you know, but oh my God, it's just, it's grim. It's macabre, you know, it really is.
Yeah. That's pretty horrible.
Even if they did not kill her, it's their fault.
Oh, totally. You can't leave a 3-year-old kid in a hotel room and expect nothing to go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have to keep at least one parent behind, and if that means you got to switch, take turns going to whatever it is you're going to, then that's how you do it. Or you just don't go.
Always an option.
Or you get a babysitter or whatever.
Right.
You know,
hell, they would have been better off bringing the kid to the lobby and saying to the people at the desk, hey, you know, watch my kid. I mean, that would be fucked up too, but it wouldn't be as fucked up. At least there'd be somebody kind of trying to look out for them.
Yeah. I don't know, man. The whole thing stank to me. The situation stank, and like Raven just said, they're negligent. There's no way around that. Negligence is the kindest thing you can say about it.
Well, you know, here's the other one too. This is, if you remember, I was in Allentown at the time, so this would have been in the late 90s. That they, the au pair, that, you know, basically the nanny that like they were accused her of like shaking the baby and causing the baby to die. And that was another one. I remember seeing seeing reports from the UK, and everyone was pulling for her, and I'm like, but she probably killed that baby. I don't think she meant to kill the baby, but you know, all the evidence pointed to her, and it was like the entire country, you know, the entire, you know, nation of Britain was like, oh, we got to get her back, and it's so terrible that they're even thinking about this, because she was a pretty white girl, and it was just like, No, she shouldn't be getting away with. I mean, maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was something that doesn't justify going to jail for. But something, you shouldn't be rooting for her. You should say, "Hey, what's just?"
There was just Peach was reading it to me. I don't know if I remember the details correctly, but it was a grandmother was just found guilty of killing, her grandchild, shaken baby syndrome, and the grandmother's defense was she was dancing. It was just like, you can't kill a baby by dancing with them unless you're slam dancing.
Yeah, no moshing with your 3-year-old.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just like, what the hell? I mean, shaken baby is shaken baby. That's not dancing.
Yeah.
But that was her defense.
I don't even have words for that. Yeah, I can't. When you mentioned a minute ago about the grandparent killing a kid, and to me, I mean, like, it's never okay to kill a kid, obviously. And parents killing their own kids is also incomprehensible to me. Don't get me wrong, but grandparents, to me, that's another level of incomprehension. They,
Yeah, I don't. Well, even in general, like we end up. Suzanne watches a lot of those true crime things, and okay, I get greed to a point. I understand that people, they want stuff, but the number of times you see where somebody, killed somebody else because their family, because like over money, they killed their spouse or their boyfriend or over insurance money or whatever, and I'm like, and it's one thing I can get if somebody is being abused and they think the only way out is to if they try to go away, the person will follow them. So the only thing they can do is take them out so they're safe. That I get, but like, and in some cases I saw this one, it was insurance, and like it was a $50,000 insurance policy. I'm like, that's nothing. I mean, you risk going to jail forever for 50 grand. I mean,
if I was going to risk going to jail for 50 grand, I'd steal a Corvette.
Right,
what I mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it wouldn't be fucking murder where you're gonna be doing a 25 bid. That's bullshit. That's what's so fucking ridiculous. It's not like you can like retire on $50,000.
That just blows my mind. Like I mentioned a minute ago, I've been watching a lot of Perry Mason, and some of the reasons in Perry Mason, and for that matter, Columbo, if you watch Columbo, some of the reasons people murder on TV shows is pretty weak, and it makes me wonder if that bleeds into people's so you can kill someone for, as you say, for 50 grand. That's a good enough reason. Or whatever. I mean, like on Columbo, Jesus Christ, you're interfering with my career, so I'm going to kill you.
So wow, now knowing that's something that you can do, my list expanded.
Well, I mean, once upon a time, when we were lots closer to less civilized, shall we say, people had to kill their own animals in order to eat. So killing wasn't necessarily something that was as like terrifying to the average person as it might be now. I mean, I don't even like killing bugs anymore. You know what I mean? And in my life, the only animals I've ever killed were fish and maybe a couple of gophers, but
yeah.
Oh, and insects, of course, count as animals, right? So,
well, see that's actually one that I've had questions. I haven't. I mean, I have some friends who are vegan that are cool, so I don't give them a hard time. But like, whenever I run into douchebag vegans, I always wonder. It's like, well, if you have pests in your house, if you have rats or mice or roaches or ants or something like that, would you kill them or take the steps that they would get killed? Because. And if they say yes, because I would expect them to, because it's not a good thing to have your house get infested. So obviously, like roaches. Well, shrimp are only, like, biologically speaking, aren't that far away from roaches. So I get if you don't want to eat terrestrial, mammals, but what's wrong with? I mean, shrimp are like, again, biologically speaking, not too far away from roaches. So
sea bugs.
They are. So what's the problem? What's the ethics of killing shrimp? I mean, they don't appear to have anywhere near the mental capacity or ability to have emotions or feelings that terrestrial animals
Yeah,
do.
it's got nothing to do with that for most of my vegan friends. I mean, for my vegan friends that, they're not like anal about it necessarily, but I mean, if it's an animal or an animal product, even they won't have like honey. Most of my vegan friends won't even have honey. And that's not an animal. That's an animal product.
True. But again, see, I find that one silly because basically, like 70%, pretty much 100% of fruits and 70% of all other vegetables that we eat are pollinated by honeybees. So, if using the bee, if using the bee to get their honey is bad, how is not using that same bee to if in a forced situation,
Bees can make the honey, but humans don't have to harvest it. That's
right, but humans don't. But humans don't have to basically set up hives to pollinate the food. We do. We could just go around and forage, but we don't. So we basically, if you think about it, we're basically creating bees to work for us. So what's the difference whether we take the honey or not? Which to me, it's still the same process. You're still benefiting from that same process.
The only vegan argument, in my opinion, that has ever made any real sense is to be like anti-factory farming.
Fair enough.
That's the only one to me that has ever made any sense. Everything else is just like, it's just, especially with the honey. Like everything Joe is saying is 100% true. If it's unethical to eat the honey harvested from bees, well, then it's unethical to reap the fruits and vegetables that are also a result of the work that bees do. Then there goes your vegan diet. So I mean, it just doesn't hold water. And a lot of it's also, I mean, I've heard people, I know this isn't the most of them, I've heard people talk about like faces, I'm not going to eat something with a face.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It's nonsense.
Very recently, one of my friends that's more towards the right, he's kind of alt-right extremist right now. He made a video where he was angry that Dr. Fauci helped fund research in Tunisia about leishmaniasis, where they had beagles that they put in cages and intentionally let get bit with sandflies in the face. And they had surgically cut their vocal cords so that the beagles wouldn't yell all the time and make a very loud work area. And he was so incensed about this. And yet he is, of all my friends, the best barbecue artist with all sorts of different animals, right? He's the one friend I have that has had rabbit fever, tularemia, because he shoots and kills rabbits and eats them in the wintertime. And you have to wait for the first frost so that the tularemia dies inside the wild rabbits. Some people don't know this. That's how I know. It's because my friend got tularemia. But all of a sudden right now, he's making this, impassioned plea for the beagles of the world.
Well,
like,
here's one thing, though.
Let you kill and eat all these other animals.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that humans have a very different relationship with dogs in general than we do with most animals. We have our basically parallel evolution. They domesticated themselves basically to hang out with us for easy food, and we made use of their ability to hunt and all that, herd and all that.
I see your point. We have the same relationship with cows and chickens and pigs. Parallel evolution.
Right, but we domesticated them to eat.
Well, yeah, I think one of the kindest things that our ancestors ever did for us was domesticate dogs. I mean, honestly, I love dogs so much.
Am I the only person on the panel who has tasted dog?
Has what?
Tasted dog.
Probably yes.
I would think so, yeah.
On the streets of Pyeongtaek in Korea, I got meat on a stick, and it tasted like a wet dog tastes. Like it
Okay, so My understanding of that, though, is those dogs are bred and raised for that.
Yeah,
It's not like Fluffy.
Right.
It's not like Fluffy. It's a
they would
specific.
not look at a poodle and think that it was worth cooking. Like we would look at a pigeon and say, "Yeah, it's not quite a chicken."
Right.
Their dogs that are raised that way look like the dog from Turner and Hooch.
Actually, rich people eat pigeon. It's called squab.
Yeah.
So that must be a New Jersey thing.
No. Well, the other thing too. Here's the other thing too about for me. Like, it's not very likely I'd ever become a vegetarian. But look, there are vegetarian dishes I like, and I could certainly survive on it, even though it would be a little boring. But the I don't think I could ever be vegan because like I wouldn't give up eggs. Not that I love eggs or anything, but just from a cooking perspective. And the thing is, milk, okay, I get the idea. You have to impregnate the cow at least once, and now you're taking the milk. But with eggs, hens just lay fucking eggs on their own. If you do nothing, they will just drop eggs all over the fucking place. They don't get pregnant because that's not how they fertilize. They fertilize externally. So they'll just. I mean, I have a friend of mine. She had chickens until her neighbor dropped dime on her, and they made her get rid of her coop. But like every 20 to 25 hours, a hen lays an egg. Every fucking day, you get an egg from each hen. It doesn't hurt taking the eggs does not hurt the chicken in any material way.
It's like that. Green Machine said you can draw the line at honey because you don't want to take the bees' food. Well, I mean, the bees aren't going to eat it. They make honey in massive excess. We have a farmer's market near here where everything they sell is locally grown, and they sell the honey that's made right there, in the hive that you can go and look at. Those bees are making way more honey than their hive will ever use. So you're not really taking anything from the bees. Just like if you're taking eggs from the hens, you're not really taking anything away because they're going to be there regardless.
Well, right. If you think about it, if you were taking away honey that the bees needed to eat, your colony would collapse.
Right.
I think that bees, in particular, but also there are other hive animals that this applies to. But I mean, bees, like they demonstrate a form of intelligence, which I think, considering the size of them, is beyond impressive. Like if a bee finds like a rich field of great flowers, it'll come back to the hive and do a little dance that tells the other bees how far away and which direction it is. And that blows my mind because that means that the dance means something and they all know what the dance means.
Yeah.
It goes actually beyond that because when the hive gets too small for the colony, they'll send out scouts looking for a new place to live, and they'll go out and they'll find a new location and they measure it, and then they go back and they tell the rest of the swarm where it is to give them the location, and they'll give them the measurements, and then other scouts go out and double check it, and if they're pleased with it, they go back and they tell the hive where it is, and they basically confirm, and then they'll move the swarm. And it's just like, we don't even do that.
Well, I mean, what blows me away about that is, when I was in high school, I talked to my science teacher about this specifically, and he said it's just instinct. And to me, it's intelligence. To me, that's intelligence. That's not instinct.
Yeah.
Instinct is like a four-legged creature like a giraffe or a deer learning how to walk on day one. That's instinct.
Right.
Right.
Instinct is,
or a dolphin knowing to come to the surface to get a breath.
Right. Or a dog seeing a squirrel and saying, "I should kill that."
Right.
It's still instinct in that they never have a classroom that teaches them how to communicate the dimensions of the new hive. It's in their genetics that they would know how to say that.
Well, and see, that's one of the things kind of cool about and interesting about evolution, in that, okay, Lamarck was wrong about evolution, but obviously there is some means of a certain part of our genetics dictates our behavior to some degree. Yes. And to what degree? And then you wonder, okay, so that means that at some point a bee, it wasn't that this thing was recorded in the DNA, but some bees had some propensity to do a certain thing, and that helped them find the new place to get food. And then so the hives that had that survived better, and they passed it on. But you do wonder though if there is any like behavioral imprinting, if there is
Yeah, I
any,
was just gonna say that. Yeah.
if there is any sort of thing that the DNA can somehow get altered that saves a record of certain behaviors were successful.
I would like to discuss this comment from the Green Machine because it's quite fascinating and it reminds me of like the Measure of a Man on Star Trek. What actually is intelligence? And if you can't learn anything else, I mean, has that actually been tested with bees?
I was just going to say that. Like, how do you, like, how do you can't possibly know that? That's number one. And number two, I mean, you're talking about, actually, it can be shown, because if a bee can remember your face, and they can, that's been proven, that bees can recognize individual people's faces, which means they can identify one person from another. Well, they have learned something new. They've learned that face, and they've remembered it. So.
Right, and especially considering that bees, I mean, they're tiny compared to us. They don't normally interact with us, but the fact that they could still recognize us as individuals and that we have some distinguishing features and remember that later. Yeah, that's and it's just like when you look at like crows and various corvids, that they found that not only can they make tools, but they can make specialized tools, and they can even make a tool and then modify that tool for specialization. And they've done these tests where I think they've gone as far as the corvid had to make like 11 steps to get to the food out, and they figured all this shit out.
There's a parrotfish. I think it's a parrotfish, where parrotfish have learned to use tools to get their food. They use a rock to bust open, and they're like, it's the first time that they've seen fish do this. I think it's a parrotfish. I think they're the only fish that actually does it.
Yeah. Just a moment ago, when you were mentioning about how bees can recognize human faces, it reminded me. This is slightly off topic, but it reminded me. I watched the show about eyes and the evolution of eyes, and how eyes are still evolving. Obviously, nothing stops evolving ever, and that's true for various different life forms. Because some life forms are newer in the evolutionary chain, and so their eyeballs are lesser developed and so forth. And then other animals have eyeballs that do that see, in quotation marks, because they don't see the world as we see them. And one of those things is your typical housefly. And houseflies, as you probably know, have compound eyes, so they like have different facets on their eyes. But what I didn't know until I watched this TV show was that the eyes don't see in the same sense that me and you see. Their eyes pick up. They're looking for particular vibrations that are put off by either feces or rotting flesh. And the reason I find that hilarious is because obviously human beings also put out our own pheromones and other natural scents, bacteria dying on our skin between bathing and so on, all sorts of different smells that we put out. And flies land on us because they can't tell the difference between a piece of shit and a human being. That's according to their senses. There's no difference.
Sometimes there is no difference, Paul.
No, I just think that's hilarious.
Well, like you said, there's billions of things dying. We're effectively walking graveyards,
right? Especially from their perspective, because they're only we, right? So yeah.
It's kind of funny, like when you think about like perspective. I remember, when I was a kid, where my mom lived, and I didn't live with my mom on a regular basis, but I would go, like in between school years, and I remember going back a few years ago to the place where my mom lived, and everything, like when I was a kid, like walking across the parking lot was far and everything looked big and everything. And I look now and I realize like that space to me that seemed huge, I could take now in like 4 or 5 strides, and it looks cramped actually, but at the time it looked like it. So that idea that as we get smaller and so everything that's bigger, and so your perspective is totally different. So it'd be kind of wild to see what the world really looks like if you were really tiny. If you could see it as something that's really tiny, you could see it.
I still have very vivid memories of being small, and every time I go back to visit my dad in California, he still lives in the house I grew up in, and boy, does that do exactly what you just said. I mean, it seems dinky to me now, you know, and for that matter, the whole property seems pretty small. Excuse me, but it's not, and it really wasn't, but it seems like it now because my sense of perspective has changed, and yeah, I mean, I have lots of memories of, for example, being so small that I could walk under the table, without having to duck. I can still remember that. And we used to go with my mom shopping for clothes, and me and my sister would chase each other in the clothes racks because, we were that small. So yeah, I like being able to remember being small. It's kind of cool.
I remember that stuff, doing that kind of stuff, hiding inside the rack, the circular racks.
Right, yeah. That's exactly
drive my mom crazy. She'd be screaming for me, and I'm inside the rack. They used to have the storage underneath that had sliding doors. She'd like box shoes and stuff. I remember climbing in there. I used to be able to climb in there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember at one point, like when I was visiting that spot, I remember there was a boundary where like I wasn't allowed to go past that boundary, and that was like far away to me. And I look at it now and it's like 15, 20 yards. It really wasn't that far, but it seemed like it was a long walk when I was 4.
Yep. Green Machine remembers being that small, and reading that somehow reminded me of the Steve Martin stand-up album, Let's Get Small. And I know we were talking about comedians earlier, right? And I remember when Let's Get Small came out, and then the album that came out the next year was Wild and Crazy Guy. And at that time, I thought Steve Martin was the funniest motherfucker that ever walked the earth. I mean, he cracked me up. And I listen to those albums now, and they're vanilla to me. You know what I mean? Really basic comedy.
Okay, so I don't know if it's a Hulu thing or if it's available elsewhere, but Steve Martin and Martin Short have a new show out.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. Yeah,
the only murders in the building.
Yeah, that's on Hulu. That one, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's a series, and I actually sat and I watched the whole thing, and it's corny and it's ridiculous and it's very, very vanilla, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, Suzanne and I watched episode 7, so I'm assuming there's 8 episodes.
Yeah, I think 9. I think there's. But so I won't tell you. Yeah, Steve Martin's great. Yeah, I mean Martin Short is even better. I love Martin Short. But I mean, so corny, so vanilla, so unoffensive, so harmless. So clean. I mean, it's just so you don't see that anymore, and I feel like an old person saying it, because that's. I mean, I don't care about having an edge and dirty and being offensive. That's not a big deal to me,
Right.
But it's fantastic.
The girl lets her chest out every time I'm on the show.
Right. So I mean, it's just yeah, it's good. It's just really good. Like I said, it's silly and corny and kind of stupid. And Selena Gomez is and she can't really act. But I just every single episode I'm like, wow, this is awfully stupid. I can't wait for the next episode.
Well, I might have to watch it then.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. Because I mean, what episode 7 was, and we watched it. And we just looked at each other. We actually watched 6 and 7 today, and then after 7 we were just.
Yeah.
Hey, while my gal was in St. Louis over the week, I started watching The Orville on Hulu. Now, I'd never seen The Orville before, and
second best Star Trek show ever.
It is what a lot of things that Star Trek should have been. It really is. I mean, like the sense of humor in The Orville's just right, because it's not a comedy per se, but they have enough comedy in it. It's just done. I think it's done really, really well. And what I was most impressed by was like on the 3rd episode, was it Vortis and his partner have a baby, and it turns out to be born female, and they're an all male species. And so they want to have the baby to have a sex change like right after it was born. And I mean, that episode dived right into some pretty serious stuff, man. I mean, right off the bat, talked about circumcision as well, which is not comparable, as they make the point in the show. But there's certain principles of circumcision which are similar, but like the consent
point where all of the species is all male. Are they really male?
Apparently not. You can have a female. Apparently, 1 out of every 75,000 births comes out female. That's what the statistic they said in the show. So,
well, the thing is kind of interesting too about the Orville is that all these the anti-SJW people who they're always like, oh, the stuff is in our face, and way back it was more subtle. But they like the Orville. The Orville's not subtle at all.
No.
I mean, the Orville is woke as fuck, but yet somehow they don't seem to get that.
So yeah, I mean, the Orville came out around the same time that Discovery started, and I was watching Discovery, and then I watched Orville, and I was just like, why is this non-Star Trek show a whole lot more like Star Trek than Star Trek?
Because the reason is they got Brandon Braga in on it, and Brandon Braga was, in on Next Generation and Voyager and DS9. So
yeah,
I think Enterprise as well.
I think that
part of the problem is that Discovery, people that are doing Star Trek now don't really understand what Star Trek ever really was. It's not an action show, and it's not about the tech. It's about the personalities. It's about the dynamics of the people.
It's about politics and social justice.
Yeah,
that's what Star Trek always was.
Which is kind of ironic because the people, the right wing douchebags that I don't like the Discovery because it's boring, but the people, the right wingers that don't like it because they're saying, no, it's too woke. I'm like, no, it's not woke enough, because the old show, all those other series are all fucking woke.
Here's what drives me crazy about Discovery. I like the storylines, so the LGBT stuff that a lot of the social justice things, a lot of that stuff I really, really like, and it's right in line with the Star Trek that I've always known from the beginning. What I don't like is that everybody on the show is an asshole.
Yeah.
Everybody's an asshole. Everybody has an edge. Everybody's pissed off. On Discovery. Everybody has an edge. Everybody's pissed off. It's so dark, and the sets are always so dark and so gloomy, and it's just like, this is supposed to take place between Enterprise and the original series. Those are both those series were full of hope. Both those series, I mean, they were about hope. They were about becoming better. They were about overcoming our biases, and I mean that was what that's the central core of what Star Trek always was. And Discovery said, yeah, fuck that. And they'll say, yeah, they have LGBT stuff, and there's like, here's a trans couple, and they're going to be front and center for this episode, and that's all this episode's going to be about. That's fine. But everything is so dark and so gloomy, and nobody has any hope, and everybody's going to die, and everybody hates each other, and they're always yelling at each other and insulting everybody. So when the fuck did Star Trek become a bad soap opera?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. And this is what killed the early 2000s Battlestar Galactica for me. Because I just rewatched that series recently, and people always talked about how campy it was. But there's some campy elements, but it gets a bad rap. It's a much better show than people gave it credit for. But ultimately, yeah, it's a dark thing, because obviously you're getting chased by robots that are trying to kill what's left of the species. But there was still hope, and they were the characters. You love them. In the new Battlestar, or more recent Battlestar Galactica, I didn't care about any of them, and I actually hoped they would die. I was actually rooting for them all to die, because it was. And I get people are like, oh well, it's greedy. I'm like, yeah, you can be greedy and have hope still.
Yeah, like the only character on Discovery that I ever really liked was Wilson Cruz. And he played the person with the most hope. I mean, he was a doctor. I guess it was, that's his thing. But I mean, he was the only bright light in the entire fucking series. Yeah. Everything else was just so fucking dark. It was just, the first episode, everybody's yelling at each other. So it's like, I've watched every Star Trek iteration of Metallica, and they never ever insulted each other like this.
Right.
Right. Well, I've only watched like the first 4 episodes of Discovery right at the very beginning of the pandemic shutdown. I thought to myself, this is it. I'm going to give this a shot and I'm going to watch them all. Yay. And I watched like 2 the first night and then the next 2 the next night. And I didn't necessarily think in terms of it's dark, but there was something about it that wasn't clicking with me. And the only one that I could really identify with is this is me, the ultimate first world problem, right? But I mean, I am so sick of how many times have the Klingons been remade in Star Trek? I mean, come on, let's settle on a Klingon and just leave it there. Do you know what I mean?
Well, especially since they made the Klingons not interesting. I mean, they're orcs now. They're wooden and one-dimensional and pointless.
And at least the canon. They had changed them, but they worked it into the story. There's a reason why. You know what I mean? And like in Enterprise, the Enterprise series, they examined that and said, why do some of the original series, Klingons have smooth heads, and why some of them, later on don't, and why the ones in Enterprise early on don't. Why the change? And they explained that. And some people didn't like that, but I mean, still, number one, that was canon. Because it was the show and they did it. So that's the thing. But at least there was an explanation.
Right.
This there's no explanation. It's just like, these are the Klingons, deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with the whole Kelvin universe for the new Star Trek movie series. I mean, they just redesigned the Klingons all over again.
Yeah.
And for no cinematic reason, as far as I could tell, I think just for the sake of making it new. And it just kind of bugs me, man. It shouldn't bug me as much as it does, but it bugs me.
To me, I mean, I didn't like the aesthetic, but I could have gotten around it if they made them interesting. But they're not. They're one-dimensional. They're orcs. They're not even as interesting as the orcs in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Because at least they had personalities.
One thing about the Klingons, which has always been mysterious to me, even when I was a child watching the original series, is like, this is a warlike culture, and all they do is conquer. Okay, but how the hell did they get into space like that?
Okay, so that is also explained. They kind of dive into that a little bit on Enterprise.
Oh, see, I never watched Enterprise. I tried 1 episode, and I'm like, no, I'm out.
Archer was being tried before tribunal on the Klingon homeworld. He had an advocate. It was an assigned advocate, and the advocate, I mean, he was a lawyer. I mean, that was what he did, was he studied the law. And he said everybody believes that the Klingons are all, warriors. Because we have scientists and we have, educators. He's like, my father was an educator, and I am a lawyer. So it's just like any other culture. It's just that for Klingons, the most defining thing about them has been that they put a high value on their warriors. There's a real high value on honor and on war.
And on top of that, if you think about it, of course, when did we usually see Klingons? Well, in their warships. Well, of course, you're going to have the warriors in the warships. There's not so many accountants on warships.
Klingon accountant.
well, actually, what's really, if you remember, when they have Worf on trial because they basically for the sins of his father, supposed sins of his father, and then basically it's revealed that it was House of Quark. They're like, you're going to use money and deceit to like steal a noble house, and so they're like totally disgusted that they're using that the Duras is using accounting tricks to try to
Can you imagine a Klingon accountant though? Pay your taxes for the glory of the Empire.
I'll be right back. I hit the bathroom.
Well, listen, friends, I think it's a good time to wind down the live show and continue this conversation afterwards, unless, like last week, I wound it down too soon, and then there was a really good conversation afterwards.
Don't wind it down until I come back, at least. Give me 2 minutes.
Okay, you're going to come back, so I'm not going to wind it down. We're going to talk about more Star Trek, I guess, then. which suits
Well,
me.
I did have something to say.
Go on.
Cincinnati has this football team called the Browns that suck really bad, right? And they're going to get beaten by the Steelers tomorrow. And Vegas is in the chat and knows this to be true in Vegas's heart.
Oh, is he a Browns fan?
Yeah. That
Why would that be?
I gotta think that somebody in Vegas's childhood wasn't the perfect role model for impressionable youth. I mean, Vegas isn't like a Raiders fan, but still something went wrong, terribly wrong.
When I was growing up, I was a Raiders fan because they were still in Oakland. That was they hadn't left Oakland at that point. And also, obviously, the 49ers. Although in the 70s, when I was a 49ers fan as a child, the 49ers kind of sucked. They didn't really get good until they got Joe Montana and all that. And the rest is, as you say, history. But, yeah, I never really was much of a football guy, really. But, I think so Cincinnati hosts the Bengals, dumbass. Yeah, I was going to say I thought the Cincinnati team was the Bengals. Cleveland is the Browns. So that was a bit of a faux pas.
Yeah, it was.
Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Those Ohio teams, they're all just they're all shit.
It's Ohio, so it doesn't matter.
I've never been to Ohio, but I have this imagination that Ohio is like full of industrial crap,
It's everybody there is on the witness protection program.
or the sex offenders registry.
Nobody's going to go there to look for them.
I was in Ohio on my trip. At least part of it, anyway.
And everyone there was on the witness protection program, right?
Only half. The other half was on the sex offender registry. So yeah, Star Trek. But I think that I think that with the newer stuff they just keep trying to produce tension in the wrong way. I mean, there was tension in the old shows too, but I don't know. Like they're creating conflict among the crew, and that's okay occasionally, but it shouldn't be like part and parcel. Because again, this is supposed to be like a military vessel. How the fuck are everybody what kind of shit captain isn't putting the kibosh on that shit? Transfer the malcontents out and get them the fuck off your ship.
Well, I mean, I hate to bring up Voyager. It is my favorite Star Trek after all. But I mean, one of the main themes of Voyager is everyone there depends on everyone else there. You know what I mean? And you have to be loyal to your people. You have to be because you depend on each other to survive.
Right.
So, I mean, getting along isn't just desirable. It's an imperative.
And most of the shows were that way. I mean, Enterprise was that way too. I mean, it was just like you had a job in it. You had to do it because everybody else was depending on the fact that you were going to do it. And that their ability to do their jobs could oftentimes rely on you doing yours.
Right. And it didn't mean that there were never conflicts among people because they're people. But it wasn't allowed to go too far because otherwise, like you said, then the cohesion breaks down. And then
it wasn't military though, Joe. Technically, they're not military vessels.
Yeah, they say that, but they're pretty much. I mean, they're
very militaristic.
Yeah. We're a science vessel with large quantities of photon torpedoes and phaser arrays, but yeah, we're not in the military. Oh, we have military ranks, by the way.
Military ranks also. Yeah, I mean, but okay. So again, I got to go back to Enterprise because they talk about that. That's addressed. They address why the ships are so heavily armored, and it was because the Enterprise went out there with nothing.
Brandon, you're gonna make me watch the Enterprise at this point.
If you haven't watched it, then you should. Enterprise it had its negative qualities, but I mean it really sets up before the original series. I think pretty well. And I mean if you have to imagine what our first actual ship in space that's crewed by an entire crew is going to be like, I think it's a pretty good guess about how we would handle it, because it's very much like inside a submarine.
Yeah. And it's a decent show. It's not as good as some of the others, but it's worth watching. And see, for me, Voyager is a show that lost me very early on. There's an episode called, and for this whole cohesion thing we're talking about, there's an episode called Phage, and yeah. So that there's, for people who don't know, there's some species that they're effectively galactic lepers, and they have some sort of degenerative disease that their organs die off. So they go around like kidnapping people and stealing their organs. So they get Neelix and they take his lungs. So they use the fucking hologram to replace his lungs, which don't get me started. But beyond that, just say okay, fine, suspension of disbelief, whatever. So they track the aliens down to their world. They find the one who stole the thing, and they're like, you see, and Janeway's like, give Neelix his lungs back, and they're like, we can't. And they're like, no, you have to give him back. Oh, we put him in Bob. Well, we'll give him back, and like, well, no, Bob will die. And then she was like, oh, it's like, oh, we can't do that. What the fuck are you talking about? They don't belong to Bob. It doesn't matter if Bob. It really doesn't matter if Bob dies, because Bob doesn't deserve to keep those lungs. Those are stolen lungs. Neelix needs those lungs. I'm like,
I was on the exact same page.
Kirk would have taken those out with a spoon if he had to.
If he had to, yep.
The whole point of that, though, is the whole point of that, though, is this supposedly evolved mentality about
that's not an evolved mentality.
You say that because you're living in the 21st century. Wait till you get to the 24th century.
No.
Right?
Well, how evolved is it to say that? Okay, I can take part of you against your consent, and then as long as I need it, that's justification for stealing from you and potentially making you die. I'm sorry, that doesn't fly with me. And then and also you think about this: any captain who would allow that to happen to their crew person and let it stand would lose the respect of their entire crew instantaneously and would never get it back, because that means captain doesn't have my back. They will turn me. They will give me over because somebody makes up some corny justification and leaves me in the lurch. They would never serve that person. There would be a mutiny.
I'll tell you what, Joe. That means that Voyager lost you on episode 4.
Yes. Yes.
So, when the Enterprise left the Earth for the first time, they had like very minimal weapons, and they got attacked everywhere they went. And it got to the point where it's just like, we need to do something. And they ended up going back to Jupiter Station to get refitted. And that's why the ships are armored the way they are, because every time they turn around, somebody was taking pop shots.
Right, that's interesting.
Because space is dangerous.
I want to say about Star Trek Voyager, it's my personal favorite for reasons which would take too long to expound, and I won't bore you guys with it. But suffice to say, I mean, I'm well aware of all the inadequacies of Voyager, don't get me wrong. But the biggest one for me, right, is the potential of that premise. 70,000 light years from home. It's basically lost in space, okay? But trying to get back home. But what's really annoying about Voyager to me is, like, despite the fact I like it, Steve Shives is right. They ruined the Borg. That's for sure. Okay. But it's not just that. That show had so much potential for visiting alien worlds and doing lots of interesting things, and so much potential for really interesting character development. But they have 3 characters that really develop: the Doctor, 7 of 9, and the Captain. The rest of them, more or less, they do develop a little bit, and they sure make attempts at something like B'Elanna, for example. There's a couple of good B'Elanna episodes, but most of them of her trying to get in touch with her Klingon, whatever. It just doesn't work. You know what I mean? And it's really annoying because you see them trying and failing sometimes. And some of episodes of Voyager, there are some of my favorite science fiction TV episodes ever. Like the one where Neelix and Tuvok get mixed together into one person. That's a different twist, So she does do the thing, Joe, and separates them and kills doesn't kill him, I suppose, because he's re-separated. But I mean, that's an episode which kind of stretches your sort of imagination and goes, what would the ethical thing to do be for sure?
See, to me, that was always an obvious one too.
Well, you have to put him back.
You have to put him back. You have to go back to the original people, because again, that new person may be interesting and great and wonderful, but they don't have the right to basically subsume the other two people.
I think the principle is that you don't have the right to take someone's life against their will. I think that's the principle that's being explored there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the most morally correct, I guess, of all of them has always been Picard as a captain. All of his justifications for everything always made sense to me. All of his approaches, everything always he always does the right thing. Or at least in the end, it's like
I think he did a pretty good job, but I think that, well, I'm going to surprise people. I'm going to actually say that Kirk and also Cisco, to me, were better on that score, because again, there were certain things where Picard gave over to the Prime Directive. In a way, I'm like, look, if a species is going to get wiped out, the idea that you're going to contaminate them by helping them live doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if you want to talk about there's repercussions for the other species in the universe, that's a different story. But you can just say, well, we because the whole point about the Prime Directive is that you're not contaminating these species, but before they're ready for outside contact. But for it does and it doesn't apply to someone who's about to get wiped out.
So that moral question, before there was an actual Prime Directive, an Enterprise, where they found that planet that was they had the two dominant species, and one of them was going to die out, and the other one, which was the submissive or the lesser dominant species, it was like this unusual thing where there were two evolved humanoid species, was going to take over. And, the more advanced one that was dying off was asking for help. And Archer and his crew came up with a solution for their problem, but didn't share it because they said that would have been a violation of the Prime Directive. Do you think Archer was correct in allowing that species to die off?
Now, see, that's a different case, because now you're talking about it's not a matter of like the whole world dying. It's a matter of which two do you help and all that. I still, my thing is, if I recall, the more advanced species was actually at the point where first contact was allowable anyway.
Yes.
And see, that's the whole thing. This is where the problem I have with all the Star Treks in general, is they're never really consistent. The whole point about Prime Directive, the Prime Directive is not polluting basically pre-warp societies.
Right. Well, you got to remember, in Enterprise, they didn't have a Prime Directive yet.
Right.
So it was pre-Prime Directive, but there was an idea where Archer was saying we need to learn what lines to cross and which ones we don't.
But see, the problem I had with his decision there is that, again, we're not talking about a species that was if it was a species that we were not, we think ethically we shouldn't be, talking to them at all. Because if you think about it, I mean, you could use that justification not to help anybody. You're like, well, why would you ever cure any disease if the natural order is to kill you off? Then don't give anybody medicine, right? So it's even kind of a silly thing. So I think that he made the wrong.
You think he should have helped them?
I think he should have helped them.
That's a tough one, because I don't know if I would have. There was because again, the natural order argument, like the natural progression of what was supposed to happen on that planet, was pretty clear. And I see the justification for withholding the technology. But yeah, I see what you're saying also, though. So I don't know. I don't know if there was a right or a wrong to that one. I've actually seen Andrew Murkison make the same argument that you just did. He was saying that one episode of Enterprise ruined the entire series for him, because he said it was such a stupid decision on Archer's part.
Maybe the whole concept of the Prime Directive isn't that far-fetched. I mean, I don't really believe, as we've discussed in previous streams, I don't really believe that interstellar travel is actually possible, as in the same way you travel across a road or an ocean or whatever, right? However, if there was such a thing, as fantastical as that sounds, and extraterrestrials could come to the Earth, would it be ethical for them to do so?
Well, right now, probably not. Again, because you're just using the prime. If we use the prime directive as a guideline, we would definitely be considered a pre-contact civilization. So something that we're not technologically advanced enough for them to come because of the disruption it would cause to our society. But in the case of the one where Raven's talking about, that's a society where they already made the decision to talk to them. So
What if they think of us the same way we think of, I don't know, termites, right? so they don't mind fiddling with our, whatever, because they don't have any respect. We're not civilized,
Well, then it would be kind of like what we done to indigenous people here on this planet.
My point exactly.
Basically describing. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but North Carolina Island, you can't visit it. There's a tribe there. They're in the Stone Age, and no one's allowed to visit them. They don't want any visitors. They will put up a volley of arrows like no one's business.
Yeah. People get killed there occasionally. They go to the island either by mistake or on purpose because they're going to, bring God, and they don't come back.
That happened like 2 or 3 years ago. A fellow went out there and he got murdered, and there was like an international outcry. And the Indian government, which administers the Sentinel Islands, even though whatever, that's not the point. The point is they said, well, sorry, they're following their laws. Their laws say you can't come from the outside onto their island, and the penalty for doing so is death. It's not that they're lawless. You just don't like their laws.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, now, I'm not against the idea of a prime directive. I think something like that's actually, in principle, is a good thing. But like I said, I think one of the biggest problems is that throughout the various series, there was a lot of inconsistency as to how that's supposed to be interpreted.
Sure. I mean, the original series of Star Trek, they don't even take it seriously at all. They reference it in its absence. Oh, you broke the prime directive, Captain. Oh, yeah. Well, these people need to evolve.
That's the thing. Yeah, because Kirk goes around at any time there's a society that's being run by a computer. I mean, how many sentient computers did they destroy because they were basically controlling the people?
Yeah.
Now, his justification was this is no longer an evolving species, because their computer control is holding them back and preventing them from doing
so Kirk got off on green girls and killing supercomputers. I mean, those were his kinks.
This is another time I have to jump in and say I agree with Steve Shives, because I saw a video that Steve did about Kirk and his women. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that video, but Steve actually put up a really good defense of Captain Kirk, and that he's not the womanizer that he has the reputation of being. And he goes through every single encounter with all the different women in all the different episodes and why it's not as bad. I was actually shocked, because I kind of thought that he was a pussy hound, frankly, and that was just unnecessary. But I didn't see it as necessary. But the people who wrote the show seemed to think it was necessary. And to be frank, Gene Roddenberry was all about the chicks. That's why all the chicks had the short skirts. He slept with almost everybody in the show during the 60s.
It wasn't so much that he was like a pussy hound. He was an adventure hound, and that was more of his thing. He was reckless. He was with a lot of women in the show, and even if they didn't directly show it, they do imply it, and that wasn't meant to be that he was like a womanizer, more of just an adventurer. He wasn't the marrying type.
It's a swashbuckling characteristic.
Yeah. Well, and this is and actually the other thing he gets a bad rap for is being a warmonger, and I've got a number of episodes that prove without a doubt that he's not in any way a warmonger.
I never got that impression. I do know a lot of people do, but I never got that. I always got that he was really quick to not revenge, but to reply. Yeah. You punch me, I'm going to punch you harder. Which I think is a good attitude for a captain, I think. But
the only episode at all where someone could say he was really spoiling for it was Errand of Mercy. So that's the one with the Organians. So, they're stuck on the planet. And they go to the planet to try to negotiate. The Organians tell them like, leave. We're not interested in what you're doing, what you're selling us. We don't need your help.
Right. And if
while
the Klingons are coming, you have to let us help you.
exactly. And then while they're there, the Klingons show up, and so they go underground, and they're partisans, and they're blowing up ammo dumps and all this kind of stuff, and they get captured and all. And then at one point, when the ships are about to engage in straight up warfare, and the Organians put a stop to it, and they're like, no, you don't understand. On all Klingon and Federation ships everywhere in the galaxy, like, we stopped them. Your ships aren't working right now. And Kirk's like, we have the right, and he's like, what, to slaughter people by the billions? And he's like, well, no one wants war. But so that was he kind of let his desire to defeat the Klingons get the best of him. But Taste of Armageddon to me is one of my it's actually it's one of my top 3 episodes. And basically when he basically tells the people of Armenia 7, like, you've had this war for 500 years and you had no reason to stop it. I'm putting an end to your war one way or another.
Yeah.
And and you see, you can fight it with real weapons, or you can consider an alternative. Put an end to it, make peace. And then same thing with a private little war. Basically he realizes that if he doesn't give support to his preferred tribe, they're going to get wiped out by the Klingons. But if he gives them superior weapons, they will commit genocide against the tribe that the Klingons are supporting, and that's not tenable to him either. So he knows the only way is for there to be parity. That this way, both tribes have a chance of survival. That maybe tomorrow they can come to some accommodation and end their feud. But there's tons of, for that matter, the Balance of Terror. At the end of the day, he doesn't want to destroy the Romulan ship.
Right.
The Romulan actually commits. He actually self-destructs.
Yeah. And this, the whole thing about dying with honor and all that. What's your favorite episodes of TNG? I've got 4 that I can't really separate from which ones are my top 4, but The Inner Life, which is the one where Picard gets the thing in his forehead and he has a whole lifetime on an alien planet. There's the one, I think it's called Justice, where Wesley steps on the flowers and he wants to they want to give him a death penalty. There's the one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one where Riker falls in love with the androgynous life form. I don't remember the name of that one, but that's a bloody brilliant one. And there's the other one called it's with Data, where The Measure of a Man. That's literally one of my favorite episodes of TV.
So, like, mine, Measure of a Man, is one of the best episodes of anything ever on TV. Also, so Measure of a Man, Justice was good. Also, Encounter at Farpoint, both parts, part 1 and 2. I would consider as one, because it's one story. And I don't know about the last one, but it would have to be another Q one. But
I didn't like Q very much. For me, it's relatively easy. Measure of a Man, The Offspring.
That's a good one.
Darmok.
That's my number 4.
and I think for the 4th one, that's a little tougher, but I would think that's probably the 2-parter where Kirk gets turned into a Borg and gets.
What do you mean Picard? But yeah,
Picard,
yeah, that's the
cutest.
Yeah, that's the one. And the name of that episode, it starts with a W. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember the name of it, but it starts with a W. I know that.
Yeah, I don't remember titles. Like, the only reason why I remember is because it's the first episode.
Best of Both Worlds.
Best of Both Worlds. That's it. The Worlds was the part I was thinking of. But yeah, Best of Both Worlds. Yeah, that's a great episode, and it really sets up the Borg. I mean, there's the Hide and Q. It's the Q episode with the Borg is the first one with the Borg, and then the Best of Both Worlds is the second encounter they have with the Borg. And at that point in Star Trek, the Borg is the most menacing concept that Star Trek ever came up with. And successively after that, they ruined it.
Look at the chat. There you go.
Good to see you, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Yeah, I think. I mean, there are a lot of good ones. Now, I would think. Now, Deep Space Nine. I would say the one where the Klingons attack Deep Space Nine in season 3, whatever that one was called. The one where Nog wants to, basically, convinces Cisco to write the recommendation letter for him, because I think it's a great Aaron Eisenberg episode. The House of Quark. That was great. That was one where a female Klingon marries Quark. Quark accidentally kills a Klingon. It's her husband, so she marries him so she can maintain her house. That's a great episode.
That's the only one you mentioned that I know for sure I've seen. Yeah.
And there's one episode where, and I forget it, there's a Cardassian who claims to be this one, this famous war criminal Cardassian, and he basically he kind of gives himself up to be tried, and it turns out he's not. He's just a nobody, but he feels so horrible about what the Cardassians did during the occupation, and he's trying to pay the sins of his species.
Atonement.
Yes.
I don't know the titles of a lot of the any of the Deep Space Nine shows. I'm not as familiar with Deep Space Nine as I am with everything else in the Star Trek world. It's actually the one that I've watched the least.
Me too.
But there are things about it that I think are fascinating. Like I like the religious aspect of things because of where they're located near the wormholes. How their religions have sprung up around it, and how Cisco deals with that. That to me is fascinating. The post-war stance that they're all on, and the Cardassians, and I can't remember the other with the nose.
Bajorans.
And that their relationship, and that I think is also that's fascinating to me. A lot of the interpersonal stuff with Cisco and his kid and Quark's kid and that kind of stuff, that is a little bit lost on me. That's where the show kind of lost me a little bit. I think that's too much with that. But
well, see, early on there were a lot of goofy ones with them. Yeah. When Nog decides he wants to be in Starfleet, it's a really emotional thing, especially when Cisco tells him he's not going to give him the recommendation letter, and he's like, why? And he's really like, what did I do wrong? And there's this whole emotional scene between him and not Picard, Cisco, and he basically explains that, like, he doesn't have the drive, that Ferengi drive for profit. He doesn't have the nose for business. But when Starfleet, he could do something. He says, he makes his plea. He says he doesn't want to be like his father. His father is a mechanical genius, but his father tried to be a good Ferengi and go into business, but he's not a good Ferengi. He doesn't have the lobes for it. So he's throwing his life away, and I don't want to do the same. I want my life to matter. I want it to mean something. It's a great scene.
It sounds pretty good. I've only watched the first 2 seasons of Deep Space Nine, and I watched the last episode when it was brand new on TV at the time it came out. And I see the potential of Deep Space Nine, and
there's some just really fascinating things that happen because I have watched the entire series. I was never like really deep or heavy into it, but they're like with the wormholes and there's like other beings that live like inside the wormholes. That are basically the gods to some of the religious people. That whole storyline becomes really fascinating. And Cisco being an emissary.
Sure.
It's a lot of that is really, really, really fascinating stuff. I keep saying one day I'm going to get back into it and be more in it. I just never do.
I keep saying that too.
I liked Voyager. I didn't like Voyager as much as some of the others. Deep Space Nine, I think if I really give it the real chance, I would probably like it more than Voyager. My favorite, though, really is Enterprise. It's
See, to me, actually, DS9 is my second favorite Star Trek series. I actually like it more than the Next Gen, because in a way, it's more Babylon 5 like in that it's more serial. Like so if somebody breaks their leg this episode, next week their legs healing up. And to be fair, I mean basically DS9 was a ripoff of, Joe Straczynski pitched Babylon 5, which was supposed to be a Star Trek show, and they told him no, and then they rushed DS9 into production before he could get Babylon 5 on the air, which is pretty sleazy. But the thing is that so with the same premise, they diverged and went two different ways. And so, I ended up liking, both shows, although I like B5 much more. And I saw what you wrote today, the conversation you had with Kate, Paul, about and she, I guess she agrees with both of us that, we have a lot of trepidation about the new Babylon 5 that's in the works.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about Babylon 5, right? I know way too much about it. Because I have literally every single episode of Babylon 5 magazine, which goes into the whole production of the show and all the official Babylon 5 timeline going back hundreds of years to the present time and everything like that. So I know way too much about the background of the show. And so I'm not as afraid of the new show as I think some of my friends might be, because I know, for example, they never intended to change the captain over. It was always supposed to be Sinclair in the beginning, but they just liked Sheridan's character better. That's one thing. And there's other things I know about the show. The original structure of the plot lines, he jumbled around a lot because they were never sure if they were going to finish the show on at all and stuff. So there's certain things that they wanted to do differently in the first place, but they didn't do it for reasons of financing or whatever else,
But the funny thing, sorry, go ahead.
So I think they're going to redo it the way they originally planned to do it, which is different than their actual product. So if they do the original version, is that better, or is it?
Well, here's the thing, though. I've seen, because he's put the outline out there as to what the show would have been. I think what we got was much better. In fact, I think that if he had done it what he originally planned, I don't think the show would be as well regarded as it is.
That's certainly possible. You know what I mean? I don't really know. I mean, for me, why I like B5, there's lots of reasons, but I mean, the main thing is, it really challenges your concepts of tolerance, and in mostly good ways. But for example, in the first season, there's this episode, I think it's called Believers, where the couple comes with their sick child and they want to have the child cured, but they don't want the child to be operated on because it's against their religion, right? And to my absolute surprise, back in the 90s when this was brand new, Sinclair comes down on the side of the parents. And I thought that was kind of a bold move for the show. But this idea of tolerance, how, when it comes to, if you're talking about being in outer space, tolerating different cultures is a different conversation than tolerating different cultures on Earth is. You know what I mean? I feel quite confident saying, I don't know, let's say Saudi Arabia is completely wrong for chopping people's heads off for any, I feel comfortable saying that. And I don't think their religion or their history or any other thing excuses it. But on Babylon 5, sure, they normalize all kinds of things, which I think are good, worth normalizing, like, bisexual and homosexual relationships, but they also normalize things like slavery and polygamy and group sex, and quite frankly, polygamy and group sex, consenting adults, right? Okay, fine. But it's not part of our normal moral fabric at the moment, okay? It's considered aberrant behavior, right, in our current social zeitgeist, right? But on B5, it's perfectly normal, because different cultures, especially if you're talking about from different worlds, you are going to have to make that's their history, that's their, you are going to have those arguments.
Can I address something that's that they're talking about in the chat?
Sure, go on.
Okay, so the Next Generation at the pilot episode, at the end of the pilot episode, Data hangs out with McCoy. There's later on in the series, there's an episode where Scotty is on, and he spends some time talking with them. I don't know if they ever met Spock. I think Spock did show up.
Yeah,
I think
Spock shows up. There's a two-parter episode in Star Trek TNG that Spock shows up to be a diplomat.
because I think the only thing that Spock didn't show up in was
Generations.
So Spock, but obviously Kirk, as far as I can remember, was never on Next Generation, was he?
No.
Oh, the movie. The movie.
Yeah, the movie Generation.
Kirk, that's right. Kirk was deliberately I'm pretty sure the only one of the bridge cast or the primary cast who didn't make some kind of cameo on TNG. I think all of the other ones did it.
No, Koenig didn't, and neither did Nichelle Nichols.
I thought Nichelle did.
I don't know, nothing else as far as I know.
Oh.
Let me check. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, that's right. Spock was trying to reunite the Vulcans and the Romulans. That's right.
Right.
So, yeah. I was going to go somewhere else, and now I forgot where.
That's right.
Oh, no, I was what it was Deep Space Nine. Cisco actually did meet the original crew in their own time, in their own timeline.
In the Tribble episode.
Right. And they embedded him in, and that was done beautifully.
Yeah,
that was fantastic, because that looked like he was there. Did a
I want to sign off pretty soon, but the Green Machine asked a very pertinent question because we spoke about this at some length last week. And after the show, I went, I think 2 days later to go watch it in the cinema. And as a huge fan of the book, I was very impressed with the movie. There's certain things that they left out, which, it's still 2.5 hours long. You're going to have to leave some things out if you can't get everything in 2.5 hours, right?
Well, there's going to be 2, so.
But I think there's going to be 3, Raven, because the way the book is written in 3 parts. You've got Dune as the first part, then there's Messiah, and then there's the Prophet. And they finished this movie almost exactly at the end of the Dune book. There's a little tiny bit from the second part that they moved into the first part. I don't even know why. Right. But it doesn't really matter because it happens pretty soon in the second story anyway. So
I rewatched it. I rewatched the new movie. Because remember, I said I would give it another chance. I did pay more attention to it. There are things that I picked up from it. The obviousness that Star Wars is actually a derivative of Dune. That smacks you in the face. And also the lack of dialogue. There's not a whole lot of dialogue in Dune.
Not in this movie, no. And that's one of the things that this movie kind of robs the story of, because some of the best parts of the story are not just the dialogue, but also the little tiny moments of noticing tiny, tiny little things that's just not in the movie at all. And for some reason, they seem to have written out Princess Irulan completely, at least so far. And that's mind-boggling, because Princess Irulan is the daughter of the emperor who they want to marry Paul to, and it's kind of an integral part of the story. So I'm not sure if they're going to work it in later somehow, or if they're going to leave it out. But if they leave out Princess Irulan, I don't know. That's like leaving Bugs Bunny out of Space Jam 2.
Well, after the conversation that we had last week with Jack and everything, and watching it a second time with all of that stuff in mind, it did make more sense. I was able to follow it better, and I liked it more. I'm not as impressed as a lot of people seem to be about it. It's epic. It's stunning to look at. I mean, the sets and the settings are fascinating. They're fabulous. They're amazing. But that's not the story.
Most of the set pieces that are directly lifted from the book are done really, really well. And I think that's the thing. I mean, pretty much everything in the movie, you can go, yeah, I remember that exact passage. But there are, as I say, there's huge gaps as well. And you can't, when you're really used to the book, it's hard not to notice that, Mm-hmm. Joe, have you seen Dune yet?
The new one, no.
No.
I was on the fence. I mean, I was kind of waiting for, reviews from various friends, and I've heard a very mixed bag.
Yeah. That's my experience too. The reviews are all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about it is, I guess I didn't read the books, so I'm not as wedded to it. I saw the 80s movie. I saw the sci-fi miniseries. I thought that my sci-fi miniseries was better. What's really funny is I remember how badly regarded the David Lynch film was in the 80s. People were like, "Oh, it's so terrible." But then the sci-fi series came out, and all of a sudden, people were retroactively liking the David Lynch one.
I wasn't aware of that. I quite like that sci-fi miniseries. I thought they did a pretty good job with it, considering what it was. The thing about Dune is it's such a huge story; it's almost impossible to tell. You know what I mean? In a cinematic way, because there's so much going on in the story in people's heads that you just can't get that across. You know?
Yeah. I guess like my experience with Dune, like I don't know. After watching those two movies, I'm kind of like, I'll probably watch it at some point, but I just can't get really excited. I think if the reviews I was hearing from friends were not so mixed, I would probably be more excited to see it. But I'm kind of like,
Well, I want to reference what the Green Machine says here. If you don't read the books, you don't know what the adaptations are missing. That's exactly how I feel about comic book movies, and I pretty much enjoy most of the comic book movies I see. Sometimes not, like Shazam was a bit shit, for example. But most comic book movies I tend to really like, and I think I like them because I'm not familiar with the original stories in the comic books. I think if I was a real comic book nerd, I might not like the Marvel Universe as much as I do. So yeah.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
Well, and that may be, and that's definitely a possibility. I mean, I've seen people who, like, we talk about, Tombstone, Tombstone, the Dead Man, Rational Warrior, and he's got a forum on Facebook for comic type stuff. And there was a guy who was just like, he hated Infinity War and he hated Endgame, and he was like, the only way they would have been proper way to do it would have taken 7 movies and all this ridiculous shit, because he basically wants like a shot for shot reproduction of the comic. And I'm like, no, that would not have made $4 billion collectively. There's no fucking way. It would not have played for a general audience.
So, like, I am not really familiar with the comic books of any of these, and that's, again, like you said, it's probably why I like them so much. But I do know that they've done a fairly decent job of staying true to a lot of the source material. Like, all those movies are all based on, there are comics that they're, this story, this storyline, this was lifted right out of this number comic.
Age of Ultron, for example,
Right.
And you could pinpoint where it came from. And because of that, I think, well, that's good, because then it has a foundation of something somewhere outside of itself.
Right.
They stayed true to it or not becomes, in my mind, less important. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, so this is something that existed somewhere else with a fan base that already exists. So, they tell the story, and it's, movies, video is just a different medium, and sometimes you have to change things.
Yeah.
So if it isn't true to the panel by panel of the comic, I'm okay with that. Because I'm not familiar with the comic anyway.
Well, the thing is, when you are familiar with it, that's when it becomes a bit sacred. And I think this is why me and Joe are discussing their trepidation about Babylon 5 being remade, because it is kind of sacred. I mean, that's probably a slightly too strong of a word, but it's close. It's dear to me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me with comic book people is that, and there are comic book people who obviously loved what was produced, but it's like in comics, between all the retcons, and there's in some cases where they stop a series and then restart, and it's like, okay, so they're and they have the concept of the multiverse, so that they could do all these different versions. So you've got like 7 or 8 different versions of Spider-Man, and you got 6 versions of Iron Man. So
this is why I disagreed with Jack when we were talking about Endgame. And I think it was a Green Machine, and if it wasn't you, Green, I'm sorry, but somebody in the chat, and I think it was Green Machine, saying how they hated Endgame because they used time travel as an easy way to win. And it's like, but that's not what they did. I mean, in that movie, for that little part of the story, sure, but they were setting up a much larger universe. Because now the X-Men are coming in. The Fantastic Four are coming. You have the Eternals, which is out in like a week and a half or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I hate time travel, But I mean, it's a fantastic. As far as a story and beating the bad guy, yeah, I get what you're saying, Green. I get it, but it's just a doorway to a larger universe, and that to me is cool.
Well, and the thing is that okay, like as far as time travel goes, I tend to not like time travel, but it depends on how it's done. My problem with with Star Trek various series is that they overuse time travel, and it became like like a foil. Like, oh well, we need to do something. Oh, we'll just change events.
We'll just slingshot around the sun.
Exactly, but but whereas in Babylon 5, I mean there's really only. There's technically 3 time travel episodes, but they're really part of the same.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, actually, sorry, it's 4 episodes. There's 2 episodes in season 1 and 2 episodes in season 3, but they're all they're connected, so it's all part of the same story. And it was basically built. It was baked in from the beginning, so it wasn't like Deus Ex Machina. It's actually part of how they got to where they are in the first place. In the case of Endgame, I actually like the whole idea that look, we can't change the past. We're actually borrowing shit from another timeline so that we can fix our future, but we're not actually changing the past.
Right. They handled it right. I've never seen any other anything handle time travel the way they did in Endgame, and I think they did it right.
Yeah.
I mean, and the DC universe is also going to go into the multiverse realm. They're already there, I think, with the new Batman. And that is going to be explained by basically, something that happens with the Flash. Is what triggers this whole thing with the multiverse, how they're able to access it. It has something to do with him running so fast that he breaks time or some stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But that's the thing, and which I love. I'm looking forward to the new Spider-Man movie, because basically, as a result of basically these timeline messing up things, they're pulling in the Sam Raimi films and the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, but now they are actually MCU canon now.
Yep. Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. And they figured out a way to cross over, because I didn't see the Venom movie, but I did see the mid-credit scene. And in the mid-credit scene, they've pulled Venom into the MCU.
Yep. As much as they legally can.
Yeah, right. Because I think
remember,
Sony had the rights to Spider-Man, and
well, the thing is, remember, Venom was a Sony movie, so this was a collaboration. So Sony actually, on their own, in conjunction with Marvel, pulled their own character, or their version of the character, into the MCU.
it's in both their interests. That's why.
Right.
Listen, friends, we got to wind this down, because I was supposed to do this 50 minutes ago. But I didn't. So it was going to have to be a very short after chat now. So I'd like to thank everybody for being good spirited in the comment section today. And I want to thank you all for showing up and keeping me company tonight on this live stream. So please say goodbye to our loyal fans.
On my birthday eve.
Yeah, it's your birthday in a few minutes, isn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah.